That hurt. More verticality. Recording in progress. All right. Welcome to the Straight Red Card. And, well, hopefully at some point Meg Swanick will join us. We were hoping she would join us 5 minutes earlier before the show so we could, provide the usual warnings to new guests about what happens on this show, which is drinking and all that jazz. So if she pops up, hopefully we didn't get, maybe she just got the Eastern Standard Time thing wrong. Maybe it was to hurt my feelings personally. No, none of those things. So I'm sure it'll all work out.
Cigarette burns on you, Derek. Pushing down with her high heels. Yeah, suck it, Derek.
What the hell was that all about? All right.
Hurt your feelings, all right.
Just want to make sure. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay, good. All right. People can hear me. So, the whole purpose of this, and before we get too far into covering what we're going to cover, which is Gregg's last interview with Bobby Warshaw.
Well, not necessarily his last interview, but the last one that was up.
Yeah. Did we have some questions we want to take on before? Give Meg a little more time.
You pull up one, why not? All right. What's that in the background?
Is that Meg?
It's Meg.
It is Meg Swanick.
So
Oh, it happens. You just missed the goofy intro, with the Beavis and the Butthead and all those guys. So it's not a big deal. We are live, though. So welcome to the show.
Can you hear me? Okay. It's like raining torrentially around me.
Yeah, that's how it was here in Indiana yesterday. A torrential rainstorm, literally almost all day. So
they referred to the evening front that went through as tornadic. I didn't see it.
I thought it's pronounced tornadic.
You say potato.
Meg, what do you say? Tornadic or tornadic?
It's a tornado.
Hold on, give me 1 second.
Okay.
It's a tornado.
I always thought it was tornadic, though. But anyhow, Meg's
it tears through your attic, sure.
Could have a leak somewhere. So she's got to check that out with that torrential rains in Costa Rica. Probably should have said where she was. So there she's back.
I'm back. Sorry about that.
I thought maybe you had to plug a hole in the ceiling or something.
No, that is what was happening. So I'm still in Costa Rica and I'm staying in an Airbnb that I love. It's like in a really cool area, but it's pretty bare bones and there's like no air conditioning. And so I have all the windows open because it's really hot. And then it started pouring rain like 2 minutes before I got on with you guys. And I am in front of a window and it was getting on me. So,
well, we'll fight.
Much like Derek's computer, your computer would just short out because of all the rain.
Yeah, I have all the computer problems, but this is the first time I'm using Chrome on this show instead of Edge. Like Edge, I'm done with Edge. And plus, people were making fun of me because I was using Edge. So, Meg, I don't know how familiar you are with this show, but occasionally we might swear. So that's just a heads up. We do partake quite a bit during the show as well, which you might have heard from Sam.
Nice.
Which is the first time actually I saw you, was just on Sam's show. And I just like, wow, she's giving us about as much information as she could possibly give us without telling us things she knows she can't say. Would that be a fair assessment of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty straightforward, or I try to be. And yeah, I really have enjoyed my time on Sam's show. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. You tell me, what did you get from my time on Sam's show? Maybe we can dig in a little bit more.
Yeah, so I was already talking to some of my guys that cover that I'm still in touch with since I used to be a soccer writer like you. I did that for probably a decade. And then we got the show on Big Soccer. And so we did that for 6 years. But the most compelling part, I thought, and it just started to affirm all the things I was hearing behind the scenes, was the Brooks story. It was Brooks. It was like the little hints that maybe it wasn't all good on the sideline there with Brooks. I can't remember your exact words, but it was something to that effect. Like you saw something that wasn't right. Do you remember that?
I do. I think John Brooks, I mean, I would like to see him come back into camp. And I will say I don't think he's completely vanished. I do think that he's pretty low right now in getting called in. I personally think he is getting called into Nations League, but he doesn't have a club. Unless he found one in the past week or so. He's leaving this summer, his current club, and I don't think he has the next one lined up. So I think that that's one thing he really needs to figure out before getting called into Nations League. Yeah. Barring that, I think he's getting called in. I don't think he's completely out of the question. I do think that there were issues there. I think that I wish I had more specifics for you on whether or not he and Gregg got into a big fight. I don't think they did, and I don't have the specifics, but I think there's unhappiness there in both directions, and maybe more so in John's, to be honest with you, is my sense. And I think that he, I mean, I think it's a combination of things, maybe performance a little bit, but I think it's more attitude in camp. Kind of.
I mean, I kind of saw that too. And if you watch the games and how Brooks, his body moves and the way he reacts when players have a bad play or his teammate has a bad pass, he's very negative character. And so that was some of the stuff I was getting from Germany. And
which I don't hate personally. Not to cut you off, but
no, go for it.
There's room, I think, for negativity in a team, and it depends on the players and it depends on the atmosphere you want in a team. But I personally don't think there is de facto something wrong with someone holding their teammates to account or being displeased if the performance isn't what they want. So
let's be fair. Pulisic and Reina do the exact same thing.
Yeah, a lot of bad negative body stuff from both of those guys too. So I'm not saying that's everything. Certainly, I think there is a conflict there that, I was told about, like they don't see eye to eye on certain things. And of course, Gregg likes to play an extremely high line, which means your two center backs, if you're sending your right back and your left back darting up the sides and your only cover in front of you is Adams, you want center backs that are more a fleet of foot than Brooks. I mean, I think Sam did a good job putting out a video the other day that kind of outlined, there's an actual technical reason as well. And then Gregg in the interview, the one before the other one, the one at the FA, was like, well, there's like 6 or 7 things that Brooks needs to work on, and we don't have that time. We don't have that launch pad for him. That's a lot of things, don't you think, Meg? That's a lot of things he needs to work on.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I do think part of it is tactical. He also made a comment about kind of what you just said in the most recent interview with Bobby Warshaw, where he was saying that if you have teams pressing up and if we're being aggressive and attacking and the back line isn't pushing up in cohesion and someone's tracking back, then you have a big gap in the field and all of a sudden that becomes a problem. And I was wondering if he was thinking of John Brooks when he said that. I haven't seen Sam's video, but I'll check that out. And I can see the argument for it being a tactical issue. And I imagine that played into a decision to stop calling him in. He also adds so much from a tactical perspective, but I think that he's a little bit high maintenance in the sense that you have to build around what he provides. And I don't know that we want to do that. And I do think it is part attitude as well. I think that, like you said, they don't see eye to eye. I think that John Brooks, when he's unhappy, it's clear that he's unhappy. And I think that Gregg really wants to control for a positive atmosphere in the camp kind of thing. So I can see how that impacted the decision as well.
So question before we start going over the Gregg interview, the one with Bobby. We have a bunch of shorts that we'll play, and then we can react to them. How did you get into, first of all, soccer and then writing soccer? Because I think it must be an exciting life you're living, I can imagine, but because you got to actually go and follow the team around in some of these windows. So, but how did you get here from wherever you were before?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. With a complicated, long answer. I mean, it's always been one of my favorite sports. alongside basketball, actually. Big Sixers fan, if anyone else is from Philly or likes basketball. But those are my two favorite sports forever. I grew up playing both. But I've also lived abroad a lot. I lived abroad in Southeast Asia. I lived abroad in the Czech Republic. And I also lived abroad in the UK, actually. And I think that kind of got me in love with the fanfare around the sport of soccer. And it kind of felt like there was this giant party I wanted to be a part of, like the World Cup and the whole thing around global football that I wanted to be a part of. And I think that really made it the thing I wanted to spend more time around. In terms of writing about it, it's only the past few years, and it really started as a hobby and is something I'm still growing. And I want to do, both for mainstream outlets. I write a bit for a few different people, including Last Word on Sports or The Guardian, but I'm in the process of starting a Substack, actually. So I actually would like to be independent if I can make that work while contributing to other outlets. But writing things that aren't being written other places and combining my interest, and I think other people's interest maybe, and not just the sport, but all that surrounds it too.
Yeah, definitely living in Europe was the influence on me. I mean, I lived most of my early life in Germany. My mother's German. And that kind of influenced me. So I totally get, I mean, that was huge back then. Franz Beckenbauer was just like on everybody's lips back in those days. I'm showing my age, by the way. But you did mention you write for The Guardian. So I want people to know that. I think you've done some indie articles for The Guardian and The Last Word on Sports, which I think your page is called Last Word on Soccer, if I'm right.
Yes,
Remember
exactly.
that right? Okay.
Yes.
So if you haven't checked those out, folks, make sure you go do that. And you have the Swan Dive. What are we preparing anything as you move forward?
We got a backlog of videos coming up.
I mean, I was just on Sam's channel actually, and I was telling him it's like in beta mode, but I reserve the right to revive it. I have all of these things that I want to dig into with the Swan Dive on the YouTube channel. I just like to talk to people, whether or not it's monetized or profitable. I like to talk to interesting people who are not just players or coaches or professionals in media, but fans as well, and kind of consider the stories of the fan bases and the cultures that make up the sport. And that is something I actually am reviving it. And I have an interview lined up for the YouTube Swan Dive with someone who's from England, and he actually runs his own media company about American sports. So I'm excited to talk to him because he's into obviously the England national team, but he runs a company that writes about NFL and MLB and the Union and MLS. And I think it'll be interesting to get his perspective on the differences there.
I do notice there are a lot more, at least on YouTube, there are a lot more English people covering like MLS and things like IndyCar. Well, don't you guys have Formula One? Why do you love IndyCar? Well, they love IndyCar because it's competitive. Yeah. Whereas, it's always the same cars in the F1 that win. So, Brett's, he doesn't know anything about
MLS. I think that's true. I think it happens for a number of reasons. I feel like for a certain portion of media in the UK, maybe like MLS is the hipster thing to write about. But I also think that there's a lot that attracts them. A lot of my English friends, again, I lived in Manchester actually, and a lot of my English friends, when they watch MLS, they have all these preconceptions about, that's where people go when they retire. That's where Beckham went to introduce them to the sport. Yep. These archaic ideas of what MLS is about. And then they actually watch it and they realize that first of all, the level of play isn't what they thought it was. It's a lot better. Right. It's highly watchable, I think. And then also that it has a lot of the things that are missing maybe from Premier League. And so I think they fall in love with that a little bit too.
Not to mention, we're now exporting all of our retirement players back to Europe, so we're good.
Oh, you mean Ibrahimovic?
Nani. I mean, come on, the list is ever growing.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So, where would you consider to be your hometown then? Because it sounds like you've lived everywhere, like me, and so I don't really have one except for the one I live in now. Because I was an Army brat. I didn't really have a hometown. Do you have a hometown?
Philly. I grew up in the suburbs of Philly, and I go back to it throughout my life. Like in between living here and living there, I'm always back in Philly. Kind of the Northeast generally. Like I've lived in New York a few different times in my life, cumulatively a few years.
Yeah, me four.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I love New York. New York will always be cool, I think. And I go there a lot. Obviously, it's easily accessible from Philadelphia. My sister lives there. She's lived there for 12 years. And I went to the University of Maryland, actually. So DC is also a home. Also in Baltimore and Boston. I'm just going to claim the whole corridor.
The whole I-90, whatever it's called. Yeah, I mean, the great thing is you don't have a Boston accent or any of those weird Northeastern accents like all my relatives in New York. They have the most annoying accents, but I love them.
It's partially German in Boston, so I think that's what really fucks it up.
No,
they're the best accents. Have you seen the Phillies videos of the guy checking the at the Phillies game, the baseball game, the Mets fan at the Phillies? You guys haven't seen this? So there was There was a Mets fan at the Phillies game, I think, yesterday, and some guy like took his cell phone and like chucked it into left field.
Oh, shit.
And the videos on Twitter are pretty hilarious. I mean, it's just stereotypically Philadelphia to have someone like grab your cell phone and throw it into the field because you're a Mets fan.
Dick move.
But the reason I bring that up is because there's a lot of videos circulating of Philadelphia fans like recording who have the most Philadelphia accents possible. So it's in full display on those videos if you check it out.
Oh, I'll probably avoid it. I'm very happy I don't have a Northeastern accent. Thanks to my mom. I did get rid of my German accent eventually, but this will pop up here and there. No biggie. Hey, okay, let's take on some of these questions before we move on to Gregg.
I actually had to stop the chat because we weren't addressing any of these. So yeah.
Why? The chat got ugly? What's going on?
No, I paused it because I wanted to cover this one, and then I'm going to go down on a couple of things.
Okay,
the actual thing.
Okay, yeah. I probably talk too much.
I've got to
usually
ask.
Do.
We're going to address it in the Berhalter interview. With all your experience abroad and being from Philly, what's your take on the toxicity level of fans?
It's funny that you say being from Philly because when people have talked, that was my immediate reaction. Actually, like maybe I just grew up in Philadelphia and this is how we consume sports, for better and worse. Honestly, I'm not proud of some of the things that happen, but growing up in Philadelphia, a huge Sixers fan, Eagles fan, it's like this isn't toxic to me. And again, you could ask the question like, do we want to reach Philadelphia levels of toxicity? No, we don't.
We don't need a jail in the stadium.
I think we're talking about a massive gap there, by the way.
I personally think it's an absurd suggestion that the U.S.'s fan base is toxic.
Yeah, and I think as we'll see, and we'll get into it later. Yeah, Gregg took like almost a left hook at Grant Wall. It was like, unexpected. Wow. Yeah, I don't need your support, Grant.
And while not dropping names, he also bagged on Doyle as well from MLS.
Yeah.
So.
He did.
Well, I'm not worried about it anymore. Grant will never come back on our show ever again. He's been on here once. Yeah.
Back in the day.
Back in the day. 2011, 12, somewhere around there.
Somewhere in that range, yeah.
It should be said. It should be said that I find him to be lovely in person, like going to these games as part of the press box. I find him to be one of the most approachable, actually, in person. And I think that's worth noting because I think people are different online. Or in writing and then in person. You're
saying the venom and vitriol we see on Twitter is not real life? Are you sure about this?
I'm
not 100% positive.
I personally like Grant as a person. I think he's fine. I think he's sensationalizes sometimes in his writing. He didn't used to in the old days when he was covering FIFA and more detailed stuff that was going on with Sepp Blatter at the time, and when he ran for president of RFA, but I guess he's gotten into it with a lot of people, and then this toxic thing was just probably unnecessary.
He threw out the ban hammer for a while on Twitter, and that's just a big no-no.
So I'm sure he might still come on, but I mean, it's been a long time. And back in the day, the only reason he came on was to defend himself against an article by Bill Archer on Big Soccer. That was like a huge article and totally, but then we have had Bill Archer on. That's got to be 2-3 months ago at this point. And he explained, no, they were perfectly good friends. They were
actually cordial. And then Bill wrote another article and Grant was like, dude, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I was talking to Jake from FIFA America about this. One thing I would love to do actually on the Swan Dive YouTube version is have debates, like formal debate style, and then have Grant Wall debating, Derek or whoever, and just be like, okay, go, you've got your 30 seconds, and then I get to be in the middle as the judge and decide who won.
That's fabulous idea.
I think it'd be great to have Bill and Grant in a live stream.
I don't know about Bill. He seems to drink a lot more than usual now.
He actively watches our show. Of course he does.
Yeah, of course.
What was the disagreement they had?
Back then, what was it? Oh, he thought that at the time, Grant's coverage of FIFA corruption was wimpy and that Grant knew a lot more than he did, but wasn't going to say it because he wanted to maintain access.
Bill was quite hardcore on that.
Oh,
on big soccer, just hacking and slashing.
Bill Archer was probably the most prolific and in-depth writer on FIFA corruption at the time. Like he pulled no punches. And he also knew all those guys. Who the Santa Claus guy that died? The guy from our federation.
Why am I spacing his name?
I can't remember his name. Anyhow, he was super corrupt, but they were like good friends, Bill Archer and him. It was really hilarious that he ended up getting arrested. And I don't know if he died in jail, but yeah. Anyhow, those were all the big soccer old days.
Chuck Blazer.
When I was Chuck Blazer, yeah. Right.
Blazer?
That's when I was in my 40s. We won't need to talk about that anymore.
I had to scroll down the chat to find that because I knew somebody was going to mention it. Let's cover some of these, and then we'll jump back into the Berhalter interview here.
Would you say? I'm sorry, I missed it.
I said somebody in the chat knows.
Yeah. Oh, always.
Thank God, because our memories are bad. Like mine, in particular, is just atrocious. So
it's like I'm already 4 fingers into tonight, so it is what it is.
Probably a little more than that. All right, so
you're right. I had a couple drinks prior to the show too. So
any questions before we move on to Greg?
Yeah, let's cover down some of the chat here real quick.
Okay.
I had this one up for like 15 minutes.
I really believe if we start Miles and Zimmerman, we are not making it out of the group stage. It will be a full-on press, and they won't be able to pass.
So this came up during the whole Brooks talk, and a lot of there's two sides of the argument now. Is that we're going to be facing more structured and higher competitive teams in the World Cup. Having Brooks on the roster itself would be an improvement over, say, I don't know, this last window when we had injuries, we brought in EPB and Long over Brooks. So I mean, obviously those type of center backs fit the mold that Berhalter likes to play, but there's something to be said. A seasoned Bundesliga center back.
Meg, do you see Berhalter? Do you see Berhalter doing anything different than what Berhalter normally does? Play a 4-3-3 and play sort of sometimes we press, sometimes we don't press as hard, kind of thing.
I don't think the system's changing at all.
Sure.
I think personnel could shift slightly. I don't think the system is changing.
Right.
Including depending on who we're playing.
Right. I think we play better against better teams. Like when we play Mexico and they come at us, we do better.
That was one of my takeaways from the Bobby Warshaw podcast, is they spent a whole section talking about Mexico, and they seem to have really discovered the secret sauce for beating Mexico. And part of it is intensity and wanting to beat Mexico. And it's like, okay, well, how do we translate that to other teams? And one thing he kept bringing up is not playing scared. And I think that's interesting. I mean, I don't know that we play scared necessarily against other teams, but I could see how the mentality is different against other teams.
So especially against the better teams, even in historically speaking with Mexico and anybody else that would be generalized as better, we tend to give them a little bit too much respect. Rather than trying to take the game to them, we would sit back more and then press that counter.
Yeah,
so
low block
it's
and
a
counter.
A little bit different now. The type of mentality that he's trying to push there.
And I think when he says don't be scared to play our way, the new way we play now. So I think you're right, Meg. I don't see us changing. I don't see us suddenly dropping back into a low block versus England. I just don't see that happening. It would be we don't have enough time to make that happen in the first place. We've got 6 games together, a little more than that, maybe before the World Cup, but not many to implement a And this is one of Pete's top 7 things that Gregg has to do going into the World Cup. And he was saying he has to have another formation he can use. I don't know if he does. Yeah.
I don't see it happening.
Chris Gary, can Meg confirm the Miazga dog kick? Oh, God, guys, leave her alone.
Officially confirmed. No, just kidding.
Oh, boy.
You heard it here. It's confirmed, guys.
This will never get old, I guess.
Now it is officially U.S. men's national team's canon.
Yep. Yeah. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Sure, we have
your cousin.
one of my favorites. It's your cousin from Boston. Love that. I don't even have cable, and I love that commercial. It's great. Philly is the normal. Philly fans booed Santa. Enough said.
Through snowballs. And, yeah.
But I actually know people who were at that game, including maybe my parents, and they think Santa deserved it, apparently.
What a dick. Yeah, right. Santa Claus probably brought everybody in Philly coal. I swear to God.
I just have to ask, were they losing the game or something?
Actually, I don't know, to be honest.
I'm trying to remember what game it was, and I know it's an infamous game where Santa gets pelted, and then there was like 7 people that got arrested or something and had to spend the rest of the game in the jail.
Well, there used to be a jail in the basement.
There's not anymore?
No.
Too many skeletons piling up.
Philly's cleaned it up, man. They don't even need a jail in the stadium anymore. What the heck's going on? All right, so let's get to this, or unless we have more questions, Brett, like real ones.
It was tied at halftime. Sorry, I'm Googling the situation.
Okay.
It was 7-7 at halftime when Santa Claus came out.
Yeah, no worries. Look
anyway.
Anything up you need to. We do it all the time. Sometimes we just stare at the screen for like 15
seconds. You may see me randomly looking at the screen, and all of a sudden I'll start laughing because I'm looking at the chat, or I'm busy looking something up while Derek's rambling on.
Because Brett handles all the chat comments and popping that stuff up because I can't do more than one thing at one time. So
your computer exploding.
Yeah.
I got my dual monitors. I got 2 keyboards, 2 mice. It all works.
Yeah, you're also 41 years or 13 years my younger. So there you go.
41, Jesus. How old are you, Derek? Christ.
50. Has been revealed many times on this show.
This is going to come up in the conversation too, but
who do you guys think the real leader is for the U.S. men's national team? Adams, Pooley, Zim, all took the armband the last window. This was asked in the interview as well, but Meg, just what do you think from what you've seen, especially since you've been there? Who's the leader?
Yeah, DeAndre Yedlin. I actually think DeAndre Yedlin is a huge leader on the team.
That's what I hear. Yeah.
I think it's undecided at the moment. I mean, I think that Zimmerman and Adams maybe have more of the atmospheric push. Like they're more likely to rally the team, give a speech kind of thing. I think Pulisic has a certain impact on the team in terms of, how good he is. I think they all really respect him. I don't know that I see him as being the captain necessarily, other than in those more symbolic games like the Panama home game. And I think that's why he had the armband that game.
I don't think that Pulisic comes off as a real leader either, but Adams is certainly someone who's aspiring to be a leader. He's talking about it. Yeah, he wants to be. So, but I really think if you're coming down to the World Cup, and Gregg, I guess, is going to sit down with the Players Council and talk about this before giving an answer. He didn't want to just give an answer, and I don't blame him because that Players Council is apparently pretty important. So, and they have a lot of say in who gets the band.
Do you think it should be just one? Do you think there should be just one captain instead of rotating it around?
I mean, it's pretty traditional to have one, but I'm all for breaking tradition if it's gonna work. If it's gonna make a difference,
I think the traditional one captain's fine until said player exits the field or doesn't start. Then you always have a backup. That's how I always played.
And I like the idea of having a center back who can see the whole field in front of him being the captain too, because, Zimmerman looks like a guy that inspires his teammates, number one, but number two, he can see the field. It makes it a little easier for him to say, hey, this you need to come in here more and protect the back two when we're this high or whatever. I just think he would be able to pull that off as well. So I think we have options.
With the captain having free reign of, chatting with the ref and making sure, hey, this was messed up, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. I think having somebody like Weston McKinney would be great because he always has great rapport with the refs. He's always up there, hugging him, laughing things off.
No, but
I don't think he'd be a good captain joking around.
I see him in the realm of the DeAndre Yedlin type of leadership, where I think that he has leadership in terms of his personality and the way that he gets people going. So I see him giving speeches. I see him rallying people. But I agree that more, it's probably Adams or Zimmerman. And I don't know who I would go with. Maybe Adams. I think, if nothing else, because I think he has more of a lock on his position and is likely to start more at his position. I mean, Zimmerman does as well, but I think the center back position is a little bit more up in the air than Adams' spot.
Yeah, I mean, that could be true, but man, has not Zimmerman locked? I think he's sort of kind of locked himself into that back four, don't you think? I mean,
yeah, I do. I have him there personally. I have him there, but
yeah. I mean, things can change, but Aaron Long could sprout a third leg. We don't know, and make the team. So, I mean, it's possible.
Derek, do you know something we don't know?
It could be possible that
Aaron Long is working on a third leg.
A very fitting last name as well. So.
Oh God! All right, if we don't have any more questions,
tight shirt Twelman takes the leader. I actually talked about it since we're on Twitter. We're hurting for a 9, and tight shirt actually came in and said, "Hey, I'll play." I would love it if he jumped out of the press box, ripped off his, his suit and everything, and he had a jersey on. He runs up to Berhalter, says, "Put me in, coach." And Berhalter says, "No, get the fuck out of here."
No. Okay, this is another thing, Meg. Just know you don't have to refer to Twelman as anything but tight shirt. That's all we call him on this show, because when he played, he wore the tightest shirts you've ever seen.
Kid's small, I swear to God.
Yeah,
I know he's like 4'9" and all, but still.
He had a good plan though, so people couldn't grab a shirt. He wanted as tight as absolutely possible. So we came up in 2009, we came up with tight shirt Twelman on our show, and it sort of grew from that.
It stuck.
All right, let's get to this thing. God damn it, before we're old.
Well, we're all 30 minutes in, and we're about to start the show, so we're about on par.
We might have
That's
to
how it usually rolls.
All right, we might have to skip a couple parts at this rate.
Nah, fuck it. We'll do it.
All
right. So, Derek, what's the first timestamp? I had a 27:57.
Yeah, 27:57, and this is about the fan base and the Scally stuff. And then we'll respond. We'll let Meg start.
Starting off strong. Do you have a time when you want me to stop? Just tell me stop, okay?
I'll just tell you stop. Yeah.
Reggie Cannon is unavailable. DeAndre Yedlin has a yellow card suspension, and you call in Shaq Moore. And this was a big point of conversation among the fan base, and I just wanted to give you space to elaborate on that decision a little bit more on how you decided on Shaq Moore.
So what was the point amongst the fan base?
That they wanted to see Joe Scally called in because of his recent performances in Bundesliga.
Yeah. I mean, what I'd say is that, what you're going for now is guys that have some World Cup qualifying experience, that have been through it before. Shaq Moore's played against the kid from Panama in his league, in second league in Spain. He's played in World Cup qualifying games before. He knows what it's about. We didn't have that breaking in period that you may have with Joe in particular in this case. And he's been playing for his club regularly coming into camp and doing a really good job. We've been watching this game. For us, it was, what are we going to need in this game? We're going to need back post defending because they put a ton of crosses in the penalty box. We're going to need good 1v1 defending because their wingers are good dribblers. And we're going to need a guy who can get forward and put a good ball in the box.
That's it. That's a good place. So interesting that this is really the first time we got an explanation, Meg, about Scally, like an in-depth one. Why do you think why the sudden change?
This is one of the funnier parts of the podcast for me. He's interestingly dismissive of the clamors for Joe Scally. And it's something I asked him, because Joe Scally was called into one camp, I believe. It was the November camp when we played Mexico and Jamaica, and he didn't see any minutes.
Right.
And I had asked him in one of the press conferences about Joe Scally, and he said he was okay, quote unquote. quote, I think was more or less what he said.
Wow.
And I think probably what that is something that I think is indicative of how Gregg is on a broader scale, which is that he prioritizes people that he's familiar with. He prioritizes people that are familiar with his system and that he knows what they can do, versus what people are proven to be capable of outside of the U.S., outside of our system. I think Joe Scally is capable of everything he just said, clearly for anyone who's watching him, but Gregg doesn't want to call him in over someone that he knows has already been in camp and can do the same exact things, never mind the level that they're doing it at. And I think that's frustrating. I think that is something that, on the one hand, is somewhat understandable. I mean, if you just want someone to come in and do a job and a certain person can do that job, fine, call them in. But when someone's doing it at a higher level and is also capable of it and is a bit younger and maybe has a higher ceiling and has a lot of potential, and you're not calling them in because you're not familiar, I mean, that doesn't entirely make sense to me at all, actually. So I think that Gregg does that across the board. He's slow to call people in because he's prioritizing people he's familiar with. And
and that's why he's kind of slow to get rid of people and slow to bring new people in and integrate them. And they, according to some players, need at least 2 to 3 weeks with
2 to 3 windows. 2 to 3 windows. Yeah.
2 to 3 windows.
Yeah.
Okay. To integrate. Yeah. I don't know if that's a theme you're hearing too.
Hitting off of something he said there, though, is that he was playing consistently. Shaq Moore may have had like 3 games leading into that window, 4 games maybe into that window. Prior to that, he went almost the entire season without playing.
He was riding pine at Tenerife every game.
I mean, it's a suspect question. I can understand his take on it because he wants to bring in somebody for his final window who's been a part of the system. I can understand that. But there's nothing that I've seen from Joe Scally that say that he could not have come in and done the exact same thing that Yedlin or even Moore or Cannon have done. I don't see it. Plus he's versatile and able to play the left back position, whereas right now we're kind of reliant on Des to play as a backup if healthy.
Yeah, I think even if he's not the starter, it doesn't make sense to me to not call Joe Scally in. I mean, clearly he has a lot of potential. Clearly he's been performing well. He's young. Call him in. You called him in once. Maybe he didn't overwhelm you. Call him in again. I don't know why you wouldn't. So I think that even if he's not starting, even if he's not your go-to backup, get him in camp and continue to get him in camp.
Well,
that's basically what Eldon's talking about here. He says there wouldn't be a breaking in period if he had integrated him in the 5 previous windows. Self-fulfilling prophecy created by Gregg.
Well, I think it was telling to me that Gregg didn't know what the big scoop was going to be, and he had to ask. And then, Bobby told him Scally, and he's like, yeah, all right. Whatever.
I think there's so many hot scoops about Gregg that maybe he wanted to define before he started chiming in. Or maybe he'd accidentally open up a new can of worms that Bobby wasn't even talking about at the time.
For whatever reason, he's not impressed by Scally at the moment. I think that's been clear, and I'm not sure why that is.
And Scally's changing his tune, which is what this quote is. I don't know if you saw this. Was it today?
Did you see? This was from today. Wall posted it. He has an interview with Joe Scally, and nice. he posted this part. Was it about a month ago or whatever? He had an interview, and I think it was with Derek Ray. I think, or at least he translated the quotes and whatever it was. And he basically, I'm paraphrasing his words because I don't have the actual quote in front of me, but he basically said, "Hey, prior to the November window, we were in constant contact with Gregg and USSF. After the November window, I hadn't heard from him since."
That's
and
right.
This was like from a month ago or so.
That's what he said.
And now with this interview, Joe goes, and the question blew up on social media. And he goes, "Oh, Joe Scally and Gregg don't have contact, blah blah blah." But of course we have contact. I'm like, well, you're contradicting yourself there. So I don't know. I don't know what that means.
So now all of a sudden, Joe's changed his story, Meg.
I think that's. I mean, I don't know. I think that's probably backtracking because once the fan base or once social media finds out that someone like Joe Scally is not hearing really from Gregg, maybe you feel like that reflects poorly on you with Gregg or getting called in or starting to hear from Gregg. I feel like that's probably Joe trying to play a little bit of politics.
I think you're right.
It was also brought up. It was also talked about from Hercules Gomez, and also on top of that with Jimmy Conrad, So it wasn't just the fan base in that sense.
Right.
But once that quote came out, everybody ran with it. And you're
Yeah.
right in the sense that maybe he is playing a political stance in the sense that he doesn't want to burn bridges, especially with 7 months coming into the World Cup. Anything's up for grabs, really.
Yeah. I mean, when you're a player, you know that things are going to get back. I think one of the things you get from this interview with Gregg and Bobby Warshaw is, Gregg does pay attention to the media. So do the other players. They see what's being said on social media. And I think that Gregg speaking to media is in part speaking to players, and then vice versa. Players speaking to media, a lot of them at least are speaking to their manager or the federation, and there's only so much they can say. And so I think Joe, I don't know, but I think Joe is probably honest and then backtracking because
I was kind of expecting that he was taking more the Luca De La Torre route. Luca De La Torre came out and was very vocal about everything, and then he finally got a call due to injuries and stuff like that, and he's made a name for himself within the national team.
Yep.
So I mean, I could see, not necessarily Joe saying, "Well, it worked for him; it might work for me." I'm seeing it more of like this is just him answering a question.
Yes,
and,
but backtracking, definitely politics, as Meg said, because that has to happen, and we know that from our own careers at big soccer or whatever you want to call it. I mean, we've had people we've had to retract whole stories because they're called and said, "Yeah, if you post that story, my son will never play for the U.S. men's national team again." Like parents call us, say you can't put that story up there. So.
Yeah, the parents are an interesting part of this, and the agents too.
Yeah, it is kind of an interesting mix of weirdness, and there's actually been a lot of current weirdness, but we're not going to bring it up here on this show with some other contacts that we have.
Tell me later.
We don't want to.
David D said this is similar to the Turner and his injury issue.
He told the truth and then to backtrack. Yeah,
came out and said, "Well, I got frostbite." And he goes, "Well, I don't. It was the injury is now I have is not due to frostbite. I had X, Y, and Z. Now this is this foot."
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's a theme. It's a theme.
It is a theme.
I mean, it's this
for those paying attention.
Sort of a theme, Meg, right? I mean, we're seeing
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I think so, and it makes sense. I mean, if you're Matt Turner, you don't want to upset people. I think he's playing for one position that's in highly contested at the moment. Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely there's politics happening in their comments.
Yeah. Brett, let's skip ahead because we already talked about integration and how that's an issue with him. So I don't want to cover ground we've already
31-39.
Yeah, let's do that. But I want to skip ahead so we don't waste too much more time here. I mean, time is ticking. So, 31-39 is the whole answering the question about celebrating after a loss, which I thought.
That was the hardest thing. And, it was part of it is, or a lot of it is, we owe it to the guys. This is something they worked so hard for. And at the end of the day, we're in the World Cup, and that was the objective. That's what's most important, right? It's not about, having to win this game. We have to qualify for the World Cup. We didn't have to win the game. And so, so afterwards you go in and you're proud of the accomplishment, not necessarily of that game. I think you're celebrating the accomplishment.
Were players able to look at that bigger picture?
Why is he being so honest there? And why hasn't he done it before, Meg? Because this is the kind of thing that he could answered the night of the match, and people would have probably, we hated the game. We thought it was a horrible game. Brett and I thought it was a garbage game. Mm-hmm. But it would have made us just feel better if he would have said just that. So why is it taking him so long to get to these kind of answers?
I think that it's all about him talking to his team and the players in that moment. And I think, it's definitely interesting that I would like to believe, and that maybe this speaks to the youth of the team, which they, really drive home ad nauseum, maybe even too much. I think maybe that's overemphasized, actually, the youth of the team.
Yep.
But Gregg, in this interview and in this moment, I think illustrates a need to play to the mood of the players and make sure they're feeling okay about the results kind of thing. And that feels a little bit, I don't know if fragile is the right word to me, but I think this is one of those moments where he was previously maybe talking to the players on the team.
The other question. Go ahead. I'm sorry. thought you were done.
No, go ahead. But giving them, giving them rightful reason to celebrate qualifying. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot of gymnastics done to make sure that individual mentalities are doing okay. And I think that in and of itself concerns me, that there are a lot of individual mentalities that need a lot of catering to.
Yeah, and that goes back to the youngness we'll get into next. But my other question is, to me, this sounds like an interview, since there are 0 follow-up questions that Gregg already knew what the questions were. Do you suspect that? I mean, I do as a writer, as an interviewer. I suspected it. I'm like, there were times I could hear like Bobby struggling, like I have a follow-up, but I didn't tell Gregg about it, so I'm not going to ask it.
Yeah, this whole series strikes me as an effort to make Gregg relatable and knowable to the fan base, and I wouldn't be shocked if, as part of that, he's got the question in advance. Yeah, and I find Gregg to be somewhat personable in these interviews. Like, I think he does give us a lot of more meat than he has in previous press conferences, for example. And now that qualifying's over, I think he's giving us a little bit more in this interview, but I don't know that he loves to be here with Bobby Warshaw, talking to him about all this stuff. Like, I think that this is pulling teeth a little bit for him, and it does feel like maybe he's got the questions in advance. I wouldn't be shocked.
I think he's a lot more comfortable in this setting than he is at the actual pre and post pressers, though.
Oh, that you're involved with.
When he's just taking questions from random journalists. At least here, it seems more personal, and maybe it's just a nicer setting for him to be able to just sit down and just sort of like relax a bit and answer. Because you're right.
They know each other.
Yeah, you're right in the point that he is definitely more personable in this than he is. We see him any other presser. There, it's sort of like robotic answers, and outside of like the last window, I think he started coming out of his shell. He started joking with reporters, and he started loosening up a little bit. Maybe it was the fact that qualifying was more or less all but secured. And he could sort of loosen up a little bit more. But at least on these podcasts with Bobby, he does seem to come out of his shell a little bit. And it makes him a little more personable.
He knows Bobby.
Yeah.
That helps. And so he feels comfortable with him. But I just wondered if you heard the same thing I was hearing when you were listening to this, Meg, because I was like, this sounds kind of pre-plotted. All right, let's move on to the youth unfairness thing that Meg just brought up. So that's perfect.
220. Oh, right here anyways. Look at that. Bam.
Or was the mood more focused on the loss immediately?
No, the guys pivoted pretty quickly. It was, again, it's a great achievement. I how I talk about, we'll be the youngest team in the World Cup. We could qualify with this same group in 4 years if we had to qualify, and we'd still be younger than the last cycle that tried to qualify. I mean, that's how young this team is, and that's one thing I think there's a little bit of unfairness or intolerance towards inconsistency or whatever. And I just don't think that's fair.
All right. That's good. And he doesn't think it's fair because the team's so young. But again, Meg, as you said earlier, I think we've heard enough of this really, because doesn't Michael Cameraman announce this before every presser you go to?
He does.
I love your impersonation of him, Derek. You should do it one time. I don't know if Meg's ever actually heard you do your impersonation of Michael.
Did you just call Derek Grant, as in Grant Wall?
I started to,
That's okay. I call Brett Gregg all the time on accident.
The funny thing is, when I worked in a call center for a while, and I cannot tell you how many times I was called Greg. Like, hey, thanks for calling X, Y, and Z. My name is Brett. How can I help you? Well, listen here, Greg. I'm like, I'll roll with it. Whatever. I don't care.
So, yeah, I don't know. It's a theme that I think they need to tread a little more lightly on, Meg. I think it's, these big grand announcements before the presser starts about this is the youngest team in over 40 years. Yes, the turd in the background. That guy, Michael Cameraman. And so anyhow, do you have any more thing to add to that?
Well, one thing I would say is I think that it has a little bit of validity. I think it's overplayed. I also think that now that qualifying is over, I don't think they can play that card anymore, because if they were young and inexperienced, and I think experience matters more, they've now been through World Cup qualifying, and I think that should have gotten rid of any excuse that might have given them. The other thing I would say is I think that the second youngest team, I don't know, but I think the second youngest team or one of the youngest teams behind the US is England.
Yep.
And so we're playing England. We're playing a team as young as us or marginally less young than our team is with higher pressure on them. So when we play England, we're not going to be able to use an excuse of youth or pressure because they are marginally less young and have way more pressure, I think. So that'll be an interesting test of the thing that we like to trot out, which is how young they are, even though they are pretty young.
Didn't Pep just come out recently and say that the youth argument or the inexperienced argument isn't a good argument to make? Basically saying that if the players are talented enough, it doesn't matter if they have the experience or not.
Yeah, and he said that there's always something new. So just because you're experienced with one test or challenge doesn't mean you're experienced with the next challenge. I think that's valid. I also think that Jake on FIFA America interviewed Hugo Perez, and he said the same thing. He was like, it doesn't matter, knowledge matters. And I think that was an interesting way to put it, because you could be inexperienced and very young, but have a lot of knowledge of the game or of what you're about to do. And
higher soccer IQ just naturally because, you know, it's, well, we can talk about certain basketball, like Michael Jordan, high basketball IQ.
And David D says we're 1 year younger than the 18 France team that flopped. Wait, they won.
Right. I think it's something to think about, but I don't think it's a reason to for things.
Yeah. Let's move on to
real quick. I just covered two more questions here. Sam says Greg doesn't seem like a let's freestyle this interview type of dude. And I had this one up for a while, but Chris goes, when you guys get Greg on, will you give him the questions in advance? The answer to that is no. But then we're not going to have him on either, so it doesn't matter.
I'll send him to Brian Schroeder, and Brian Schroeder will send him to Greg. That way we get around not having to lie about it. How's that?
Will you hang out with the straight card circle, yes or no? No.
But by the way, have you met Brian on your travels so far, Meg? Brian Schroeder?
I've met him virtually, but not in person. But he's a Jersey guy, and I think that he said he's in Philly a lot. So, hopefully we cross paths next time I'm back in my home area.
He's a buddy of ours. So I think you're like the fourth or fifth journalist we've had on the show since our comeback last year. So, like, we went away for a while. I don't know if you know that. That's why we did big soccer. Then Brett started pumping out all these babies with his wife, and we're like, you know what? Then we were doing the Brickyard Battalion thing, and, you know, I was going through a divorce. It was a total mess, disaster. We're like, let's just quit the show for a while. Take a break. Too many things are going on. All right, so a little background for you. Like TMI, right?
No, I like the backstory.
All right, so let's go to I don't really want to cover this again because Greg goes through this whole thing about there's a process and consistency is key and the format, and it's clear the way we work, and that's why we're going to be fine going forward, right? And all he's basically saying is nothing's changing, right? Did you hear that part? I don't think we need to play it. Yeah. So nothing new's happening once we get to the World Cup. But let's go to 35-43, Brett. When he talks about losing to Mexico and that being the most dangerous moment of his manage, that was really like, whoa, what did he just say?
Yeah, that was interesting.
They're really able to stay calm and stay present.
Was there a moment that you remember where you felt like your ideas and your past personality clicked with the team?
I think there's been I think throughout the whole time, there's always been like moments. What I would say the most dangerous moment, in my opinion, was the 3-0 loss in Giant Stadium to Mexico. That's where I started to sense that guys want to win so much that they don't care how we play. It's not important. Like there was this mental conflict. I could see it was weighing on people's mind. They didn't really say anything, but I could see it was starting to affect them. And it was important that we got that right, that we started to understand, to get our identity and to work with our identity and continue on.
That's enough.
Reassure.
So
Matt,
real quick.
Go ahead.
Nope, you, sir.
I was just going to ask Meg a question. That's why she's
Yep,
here.
that's that format. Let's go with it.
What's up with the vulnerability, Meg? I mean, I've never seen.
I think that. Yeah, I think it's because he's qualified for the World Cup, and I feel like now that he's passed the initial test, he can open up a little bit. I think that's what it is. I mean, he was hired with this being the ultimatum. You qualify for the World Cup, and so the years since being hired to right now have been to this release of honesty, is what I think it is. So I think that the honesty that we're getting is because, we qualified for the World Cup, so now we can be honest about what might not have gone wrong. And I think we did get that refreshingly from a few places in this interview.
But doesn't being so honest now show that the parts before were kind of a charade? Isn't there a risk of that too?
He's pretty guarded, and I think he's defensive. I don't think he lies. I think he's defensive. I think he's guarded. I think he doesn't tell us much. I don't think he lies. The only times I would have him saying that he's been near dishonesty are the comments after like the Canada away game.
I was going to bring that up. No.
Sorry, I'll stop. But the comments about like the dominant performance, and that's actually one of the things that I took away from this whole segment about. Actually, I don't know if it's this segment, but like playing Mexico and figuring out how to play Mexico is he brings up the idea of like possession a little bit. And I think that played into the Canada away game where he's like, well, we had the ball, so we were dominant. But I don't think that means much. If you can't do anything with that possession, I don't think that's dominance from my perspective. But I don't know if that's necessarily dishonesty, or I think Sam asked me about this when I was on his channel last week. Like, is that dishonesty or is that him talking to his team? I think that's more him talking to his team than dishonesty. But yeah, I don't think Gregg is necessarily dishonest. I think he's more guarded and doesn't tell you much. It's to the point where you don't even want to attend or watch the press conferences because you're not getting anything from him.
Oh, I know. I was thinking delusional during that. Not so much dishonest, not so much. I was just thinking, you got to go back and watch that video, Gregg. Brett, I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
You. Go ahead.
No, I already forgot. No, I'm joking.
You already forgot?
No. So my only take from that whole little spiel was the whole we needed to find our identity. We need to find our identity. This is the same stuff that we heard from Klinsmann when he took over. We need to find the American identity. What's the American identity? But we had an identity for the longest time. It may not have been the prettiest thing, but I mean, the counterattack, the quick attack, just
mid to low block.
It
depending
worked.
on who we were playing.
I mean, it worked for us. And then they started coming in. They started, changing the style, the format, the identity of the American. We can do with the players that we have. We can play this style. It's fine. I'm a big. Meg, I don't know if you know this, but I'm a big proponent of the Bob Bradley empty bucket. And I really do think that formation would suit our players really well. But we're not going to see that change by any means. We already talked about that. But it's just it's this talk of we needed to find an identity. We had an identity. And I hate that talking point.
What do you think? I think we've managed to change the identity, Meg, but is this the way we need to go for
Gregg's identity is what we got right now. We had Klinsmann's identity prior to that. So whatever that was.
I mean, I think that certain parts of that question, we've got Gregg's identity. But I think going back to that game, he made some adjustments, but some things that went wrong in that game have been going wrong since and are still going wrong. So we've beaten Mexico since, and maybe like mentality-wise or intensity-wise or whatever else. But we still don't have a striker. We still can't score. And I think that was one of the main problems in that game. And we still were going to people like Giassi Zardes, who I think was our striker in that game. And I like Giassi Zardes, but I don't think it's true that he made an about face in making those types of decisions, because that was happening into a few months ago.
Oh, yeah. Look how long we held on to what's-his-face from San Jose. How long will Ewell and Trapp, how long they got to play.
Oh, right. They were in that game, too. Yeah, I don't think Ewell was in that game. Yeah.
So, he's just a slow-to-change guy. That's okay. That's quite stubborn. It's very German American, which is what he is. So, let's move on to...
German. I didn't know that.
Yeah, Berhalter's a very German name. That's about as German as you can get. I don't know if he's an actual German American, but he's certainly of German ancestry with the name Berhalter. It's very German.
Yeah.
36-47. This is where he's talking about showing us the metrics.
Oh, I can't believe I just did that. All right, cool. Ready?
Yep.
Was there an inflection point there or a singular action that you felt like you got right?
I think, it was showing them like the metrics from the Gold Cup game versus that game and say, guys, we improved so much in certain areas. Yeah, we're poor in other areas, but, in that game in particular, like when I look at the game, offensively, there were some good things, but, it was a strain. Like we were still in a mid block. We were still defending in a 4-4-2. We were trying to build, like, it's almost like we let them play against us.
Mexico.
So we want to play against them.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest mistake. Like we were getting pressed like crazy. We were trying to play out of it like crazy. We didn't have an outlet, and then we didn't press them. So it was almost like it was, looking back on that game, I think we've learned a lot since then about how to compete against Mexico. And that was a good moment to learn that.
Okay, that's good.
Because we haven't lost to them since.
2 questions, Meg. One, the whole thing about when I played soccer, maybe things have changed. Maybe kids are different nowadays.
A lot has changed.
But if you would have come to me at halftime or at the end of the game and said, listen, we just lost 3-0, but hey, look at these metrics. They're fabulous.
Yeah.
You completed 25% more passes. Good job.
Yeah. I'd be even more mad, actually, if that happened.
Yeah, exactly. This is my first thought. And just generally your thoughts about, the way he convinced the team. I mean, you think that's really how he operates? Because he seems like he can be somewhat emotionally supportive too. We see him clap and yell and stuff like that. So, I mean, is there a connection between Gregg and the players? Do you think there is? Do you see it?
I do think that there is a connection. I think that he's earned respect over time. I don't think it happens at a halftime or after a game where he pulls out a stat sheet and, proves in the stat sheet, like, here's the metrics of how we've improved. I don't think at all that's what happens. I think that over the course of a few years, when you beat Mexico a few times, when you qualify for the World Cup, when you spend time together with a coach and get to know the system, I do think he has respect over time. Do I think that players are bought in to the degree where they're making comments? Like, I think Alphonso Davies made a comment that he'd run through a brick wall for John Herdman. No, I don't think anyone is bought into that degree. But I do think that they respect him and what he's done. So for whatever that's worth, I do think that I don't think there's mutiny, but I don't think that there's the level of adulation or inspiration even that.
This isn't the mutiny we saw right before the Costa Rica snow game where Boca Negra was uncaptainized in front of the whole team and forced to ride pine for 90. And that was an article by Brian, the other Brian, not Shredder. Strauss. Yeah, man, that was that came out. Everybody's like, where do you get all these quotes? Are all these quotes from all these players? And they were just fire, but no one would say who the players were. You remember that? Or you might have been young.
I do think the comment, well, I guess it's still there, but like someone has commented, Pulisic hates him and Gio Reyna follows that. I mean,
hate's a strong word.
I don't think hate. I definitely don't think hate. I think there's displeasure, in particular in the not core but wings of the roster, if that makes sense. Like, I've heard things about players who are sometimes called in and not called in, whether that's just the politics of them thinking they belong in the roster or not. Like, I have heard that some players dislike Berhalter, but from the core players, I haven't, and it's possible, but I haven't sensed or seen that.
That might also stem from that Pulisic quote from.
We got to play find a way to play a different way. That's what he said.
Yeah, basically. We need to try new things.
After the Canada game. Yeah, the home Canada game. Yeah.
I think that can be blown out of proportion.
I mean, I don't know this, but when Gregg said the most dangerous game was losing 3-0 to Mexico, what was that game in 2019, the fall of 2019 at Giant Stadium? I feel like he could have been talking about Pulisic specifically there when he's like reading the players who are on that roster and playing in that game. I could see that being more specifically Pulisic than, for example, Will Trapp.
I think the sense he was getting is enough of your stupid PowerPoints, and
next slide, please. Thank you.
I mean, they were playing in such a constipated way, right? And it felt like they all had assignments they had to do rather than just play soccer. And I think maybe that's getting fixed a little as we head forward. Maybe. I'm being helpful. I don't know. All right, let's move on to the next one.
Chambers does say that Berhalter did mention in his relationship with Pulisic on Cowards.
Colin Coward's podcast, yeah.
Just make sure I'm not mispronouncing his last name there. And said that he didn't buy into it until like the Nations League win.
Sound believable?
I listened to that. Yeah.
That was another surprising interview where he was very forthcoming.
You don't have to say too much, Meg, if you don't want to. I don't want to get you in any trouble. So
I don't think Pulisic hates Gregg. I think that he's frustrated. I think he feels a lot of pressure too, actually, like especially with the U.S. national team. I worry about Pulisic a lot, actually, on the note of pressure. I think that Gregg feels pressure to have Pulisic feel like he's delivering, and it's this whole pressure machine. But yeah, I don't know that Pulisic hates Gregg.
I want to figure out some way to blame Tuchel on this one. Somehow do it.
There is a way.
I think people throw around the word hate too much. I don't think he hates him. And I think it's more like, he's got critical thoughts in his brain about the way they're playing as well. And he's playing on some great teams with some great managers in his career. So he, might see a deficiency that he can't really voice. It's not really not really his thing to do it. But then Gregg goes on and he talks about, in the most honest way ever, the mistakes in the Panama game. And I'm like, this is so much brutal honesty. So let's play that.
What number is that?
38-15.
Way too far. Come on now.
U.S.
So much easier when I was listening to it on my phone. That's work.
What specific part of it?
I just think that I think that we didn't play the right lineup, and it's not to blame any of the players on the field, but just knowing what that game was going to be like, what type of conditions the game was going to play, the extreme humidity. I think we could have potentially chose other players in that. Now we did have 2 suspensions in that game that made it challenging, so we had to make some changes. But I think, looking back on it, we could have dealt with that game differently.
That's good enough. Meg, I mean, again, we're getting more honesty. It could not that have been said right after the game, maybe too? The exact same thing, and it would have been put us all like at ease, or we would have been, at least he's being honest.
It's interesting what it would have done. I mean, you could argue that if he had immediately after that game owned up to it being a mistake, or owning up to it being a mistake for specific players, maybe he wanted more time to see if those depth options that he had rotated in were indeed not in the rotation anymore, which I think eventually a lot of them ended up not being in rotation.
Right.
Maybe he didn't know that right away, and so he didn't want to say something like that right away. Also, potentially, I mean, right after the game, if he had said right after the game that was my bad, I mean, maybe we would have been coming for his head even more. It's hard to say, but I do think that he's been defensive throughout, and especially after that game, and is being honest now in a way that kind of makes sense to me. I mean, it could have been even worse for him if he had been honest immediately. What do you think?
Go
ahead, Brett.
I'll go ahead, Derek. Let me talk seriously. I honestly think that would have been more. Endearing is not the term I want to use, but more understanding, because what ended up happening is he comes in this game, the Canada game, he comes back and says like, we put in a good shift. It was just unfortunate. We dominated. And the fans are sitting here going, no, that's not what happened. And then all of a sudden people are coming out saying like, oh, you guys are just Berhalter haters and you want this team to fail. And then here it is several months later, and he's saying the exact same thing that we've been saying for months. And it's kind of a double-edged sword there. I don't think people would have been, off with his head outside the people who were already off with his head. But he could have come out and said, "Hey, it's not on the players. I came with the game plan. It didn't work. It's my bad. We'll do better next time."
It's possible he was coached to be less forthcoming. I mean, I think that players are a little bit coached on what to say to media. I mean, it's not impossible that he was instructed to give a certain lean on things.
Damn, Michael Cameraman. Up to his no good in the background. All right, let's go to
too much fluffing.
39.
Go ahead. Sorry, give me the time, and then I'll say this real quick.
Okay, yeah, 39 even, and it's about never throwing players under the bus.
So just to talk about the Panama game, he does it. Rogelio? I'm not even going to pronounce that.
Rogelio. Zavala. Cabrera.
Yeah. You can tell I've barely left my little quarter of rural Indiana.
Brett only speaks Hoosierese.
Hoosier, yeah. But yeah, he should have used Luca De La Torre and Matthew Hoppe in the Panama game. 100% agree, and that's one thing we bitched about.
Yeah.
Two players on pitch.
It's a frustration for me over the course of qualifying. It took him forever to bring him in, and then he was an obvious solution. Matthew Hoppe, I hope he reemerges. I'm still a fan of the Matthew Hoppe option, but yeah, he's disappeared from both club and country. So.
That's a question going to come up later from Twitter. So,
at least he made the 18 this last game for Majorca. We'll see how it works out for good old. I love Matthew Hoppe. I love the fire. I love the brimstone, and I like the fact that he told Gregg, "Hey, why are you taking me the fuck out?" And that was
all the energy for me. I like that personality in a player, and I think he's a good player too. But yeah, I'm with you.
Right. Well, we've been told by his family he is a darling in private, so he's just
take him off. We take him off the field because I believe my question was: is he as arrogant off the field as he is on the field?
They never are. It's always quiet, shy ones who are like that when they.
Clint Dempsey, great example. Very quiet. You got to really kind of peel stuff out of him, But he's a when you get him on the field, he's a demon, and he will fight for you.
And yes, right. I will say Hoppe's not fading. I just think he's in a bad situation right now.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
He'll find something. He'll find something soon. Hopefully, get a new manager or new agent maybe, and move on from there.
Yes.
All right, 39 minutes.
This show and maybe your other press conferences. When I ask you these questions, I'm always very aware that you want to be honest with us, and yet you have 40 players to think about. How do you balance how you answer some of these questions with what is respectful and best for your group of players?
Well, the starting point is I never want to throw a player under the bus. I think that's the wrong thing to do as a coach.
Take him off the cliff instead.
It's just not my style. So even when I talk about the game, the regret of the game, it's not based on individual players. I just think as a staff, we got the mentality wrong in terms of what we're trying to pick in that game. We could have picked a different mentality. But I think it's really important to, we're a family, we're a group, we're so close as a team. It's not about us airing our grievances in the public or our opinions about an individual in the public. I'm more than happy to have those conversations privately. And we do have those conversations privately.
That's good. Again, Meg, that's refreshing to hear that he's at least saying it. There's a reason I don't criticize the players, but I think it's fairly obvious, right? That's why he does it. Bring up any of the players specifically. And I just think of certain games where certain players have had horrible games. And I don't know anyone who expects him to throw his players under the bus. So it's kind of a weird defense answer. While being honest, I don't think he needs to tell us that. We would know that. Right?
Yeah, it's pretty intuitive that that's what he's doing. I would say he does do it sometimes, though. I remember he's definitely critical at times. So he's a little bit inconsistent there. But yeah, I think it's a little bit obvious that that's what he's doing. And it lends itself to the opaque nature of a lot of his answers. I think to your point, Brett, earlier about fans maybe feeling like they're being gaslit instead of respecting Gregg for looking out for the players or playing politics, fans just feel like they're gaslit and lose faith in the project that otherwise they might agree with.
Go ahead.
So
I was saying, Kinder King brings up Brooks as an example, in the sense that for the entire window since the Canada home game, it's kind of been an ever-moving goalpost as far as why he's not included. And we've been saying from the get-go that if he would just come out and flat out state, without throwing him in the bus, you don't have to throw him in the bus and say, like, he's an asshole, he's bad for team chemistry. I don't like him. He's got, whatever, bad hair. No hair, actually. But and he might actually like it because he has no hair. But regardless. But I think as the window progressed, again, the goalposts continually changed. He had the ability of saying it was form from the from after the Canada game, because he was in bad form. He was in bad form for club and country. But then after the Christmas break, he's been on form ever since. And then ever since then, it was just sort of like, I'm not closing the door. He's not going to be in this window, but he might be in the next window. And the next window comes and he's not there. And he's like, well, I think there's a couple things he needs to improve on in order to get called back in. But we're not closing the door. But it's just one of those things, again, that if you were to come out and say, hey, this is the type of ball that we're playing. I don't want to close the door on him. I think he's a great player, and he can definitely add a lot given the circumstances of who we're playing. We'll be looking at him in future windows. Something like that. And that's still kind of harsh to an extent. But but being a little forthright in that sense would have been better than just sort of, like you said, constantly shifting it slightly every window, in my opinion.
Yeah, but go ahead, Meg. I'm sorry.
No, that was I agree with that comment.
Okay.
I think that I think if he answers, because you don't have to throw him under the bus, like you said, Brett. You don't have to just come out and be like, I don't like Brooks. We got in a fist fight in the locker room or whatever. You can just say that he doesn't fit the system. You could have said what he said eventually instead of saying it was about form when it wasn't. Yep. So I agree with you there when it comes to John Brooks.
I just think we need more of this right off the block rather than we got to wait for the Bobby Warshaw interview. But as you said earlier, Meg, maybe it's just because we qualified, so now he can be more open about it.
Well, I think it's still happening with other players. I think it's happening a little bit with Joe Scally. It's like, specifically, can you be more honest and specific about why you're not impressed by Joe Scally? Because I don't know that we're getting the actual answer from him on that, in my opinion, actually. And I don't know that we were when it came to Luca De La Torre before.
It's a trend.
He's being honest, but in other directions, I still have questions.
I just think there's a way to say, here's why the player's not on the team without criticizing the player. There's a way to do it. People do it all the time. Bruce was a master of that,
It could just be the constructive feedback that you give to the player. So repeating maybe some of what you say to them about what needs to fit with the system or something else.
And with Gregg's system, you can always fall back down that as an excuse. Like,
sure,
we got a certain system. Dude ain't fitting in it right now. That's it. That's the answer to every question. That's a
little dangerous too. It could become the answer.
So this is the funnest quote of them all. And this is the Grant Wall toxic fan base quote at 40:10.
Okay, so in other words, that play.
One question that I think has been present throughout the last few months, and Grant Wall wrote a piece on it recently, and it is the changing nature of the U.S. men's national team fan base.
The way he even said his name.
It feels more, and to use his word, toxic than before. Do you have any feelings on that notion?
I think that soccer's gained popularity. And along with popularity comes this that negativity. Like, look at any other sport. Look at American sports. So, like, what do you think they're saying about the Lakers right now? What do you think fans are saying about them? And that's when it becomes more popular, that's what happens. I think before it used to be like, we'll support them through anything, type of deal, because there wasn't the breadth of fans that there is now. So I think that's comes with the job, like when you talk about coaching at Barcelona, there's a ton of negativity that goes around in Barcelona. That's just part of it. There's also a ton of positivity, and there's also a ton of positivity in U.S. fans. Like, it's always interesting to try to quantify that, right? Because, Grant Wall is reading, whatever he's reading, but he's not really quantifying, the total amount of fans. He's quantifying the people that are writing negative comments or are negative towards the program. And those are the people that actually take the time to write things. So, I think point. That what I would hope is that people would see the progress that this team's made. People would understand that this is a young, exciting team. Let's get up.
Okay, we can cut the bullshit part off because we know what he's going to say.
Time to fluff.
Yep. Exactly. But you've been in front of Gregg. You've asked him questions, etc. How did you take this answer to this Grant Wall part? This toxicity.
I was surprised by the stance that he took. I was surprised for a few reasons, and also because I imagine that so I think he's aware of what is said about him, and I think he knows that he's on the receiving end of the toxicity debate to a certain extent. So I think it's interesting that he came out the way that he did. I think it's refreshing. I mean, I personally think the debate over whether or not we're toxic is as toxic as anything else that's happening in the fan base. I think.
Yep.
Is there toxicity? Probably. Is it as bad as other sports in the U.S.? I don't think so. Is it as bad as toxicity in the global football fan base? I also don't think so, or soccer fan base. Do we want to adopt those toxic behaviors in their worst extremities? Also, no. But I'm kind of just over the whole conversation, to be honest with you. I don't think it's that toxic of a fan base.
Yeah, one question to follow up on that, though, could there be small factions of these supposed toxic people? Like, we were never Berhalter out, guys, because we just didn't think that made any sense.
It's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. There's no point in getting on a bandwagon that ain't rolling down the street. So I think if the mainstream press, and obviously you're going to chime in and tell me, but I think if we saw more critical articles written, or we had more in the mainstream, we had more critical articles written about here's where we can improve, here's what we can do better. I think the average fan or the toxic fan might chill out. I can't speak for a toxic fan. I don't even know who they are. I know a couple of them because they're toxic towards me because I'm not toxic enough, apparently. But I'm just saying, do you think if we were more critical in the press, but the problem is then it's the access issue, right? Because if you are critical, then you lose your access. Can you give us any insight on that? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think a few things. I mean, I think that it is true from my perspective that the media, I think you see narratives shared. I don't know that there's a lot of dissenting opinions or enough dissenting opinion in the media. I don't know that it's always critical enough when critique is deserved. And I think that for that reason, you get a lot of people in the democratized opinion apparatus of social media, people getting angry. And I think that makes sense. So I think all of that is valid. I think that certain members of the media are a little bit attuned to that and are rectifying that. But I think that there's work to be done when it comes to that in the mainstream media. And I think independent voices lend a lot of credibility to that. I also would say that I think that there's a little bit of romanticization of an era when there wasn't critiques or when there wasn't toxicity. I just think that the internet and social media makes you more aware of the critiques that are there. I think that people were unhappy 20 years ago. You just didn't have to hear from them. And I also think that when you're a journalist or a media personality, you're going to get people who are insane or like replying crazy stuff or like really angry at you. And if you're sensitive to that, or if you are really prominent and you have 1 million followers and you get a lot of that, you might fall prey to thinking that that's the rule when it's the exception and you're just focusing on it. So I think it's a combination of things there.
So Vinso has it hammered down. It says, Sam is toxicity personified. We all know that's true. Probably the most toxic one of all of us, I swear.
I think Filippo gets most of that crap.
Yeah. Let's see here. There were a couple of other ones I saw.
Filippo and Pete get most of the damage on that. Although I think that's ending as we're seeing a lot more crossover between Herc and then we got Jimmy Conrad's been on here with us.
We've talked about with both
Jimmy's
of them. Herc talks about how he's kind of blackballed with the media. Jimmy said he's been blackballed before. So I mean, it might not necessarily be as cross as we think. It could just be more people who are loosely aligned. And the sad thing is, you look at somebody like Tag, and he's got a Twitter persona that he throws up there. The rude Canadians, whatever the other ones are. All jokes. But people don't take people take that a little too seriously sometimes.
Yeah, I think he's hilarious personally. So
I love the guy.
I think his Twitter persona is great.
Yeah, so once 100%. You get your Swan Dive thing going, join our little
That's it. You need to get Grant Wall and Tack on the same one. There you go. That'd be the perfect.
I would love to. That's what I would love to do with the debates. I want to just get people. Okay, you've got your 60 seconds. Go, and then we'll be the judge. I think most people would get along, honestly, if we just all got together. But there's a lot of politics to it. There's a lot of, I think, career and ego to it as well. I don't think it's just people's opinions. I think it's people wanting to guard space or jockey for space too. So I think there's more going into it than just opinions.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of protecting space. So I've got all these writers I still know from the old days, and they don't like that all these new independent voices are popping up. Like, they don't have much problem with us because we were back in the day. They already knew us. They've been on our show. They think we're just great. But then we have to convince them that those guys over there are great too. They're good guys.
Yeah.
Just you're taking it too seriously. So, and it's working because we're seeing the crossovers starting to start now. And that's going to be really good.
So Chris brings up a great point that we've brought up a lot, is that the term toxic is just being utilized too broadly. It's too loosely defined. What's toxic, what's not. I've seen on Twitter where if you basically just say Zardes doesn't deserve to be on the national team right now, there are other options that are better. You're considered toxic. So I mean, it's just, there's got to be some varying level there that you have to understand what the term toxic means. I mean, you can't just be somebody disagreeing with somebody about a player not being on the pitch.
Meg?
Compared to saying Berhalter out, Berhalter, he's garbage, he's trash. And again, those people who are saying that can have a valid point as far as making criticism, and it's their right to have that point. Being labeled toxic and their opinions just broadly, brushed away and swept under the carpet only makes things worse.
Meg, last word on toxicity.
Yeah. My last thoughts on toxicity. I guess the only thing I would say is don't be a reply guy to a player, and I do dislike when people reply to players.
Yeah, me
being
too.
Like you're trash or you're. So I think the only thing I see on social media I could do without is replying to a player and being like, you shouldn't be on the team. Like, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And that's
I would argue and say that here in the States, that's few and far between. It does happen, but it's not as prevalent as people like to make it seem. Now, you can go on and say, well, Zardes played like crap against insert random game here. I keep using Zardes as my punching bag. Nothing against the guy by any means.
It's really toxic of you.
Exactly. But going back to Berhalter here, the one thing that and this could have just been him answering off the shooting from the hip, but the idea that the sport's getting bigger, and when the sports get bigger, negativity increases. I don't think it's necessarily negativity that's increasing as a whole that's being labeled as a quote unquote toxic. Again, it's a loosely labeled term.
Just critical thought.
Encompassing a bunch of things. Again, people who are saying like, well, Berhalter didn't have the best game. He messed this, and this up. All of a sudden, you're labeled toxic. But the next game, he does a really good job, like against Mexico or Panama. And all of a sudden, those people who were toxic were saying, well, Berhalter did a great job. He did this, and this. But you never see it go back and forth. It's just, this person's toxic because they're saying mean things, or they're not just, rallying up the flag and, rooting for the team, which is what he talked about too. Back in the day, it was sort of like we're just happy to be here, type of mentality.
He did talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, we got one more to go. And that's Living with the Critics. And I think I don't know if we need to play this because we all know what he says. He basically says we're almost an hour and 30 minutes in, and I don't want to keep Meg all night. Even though you're earlier than that, you're in Costa Rica.
I was late, so you can punish me by keeping me late. So.
Okay, good.
Excellent. We have 40 minutes of recorded videos after this. No joke.
But just to build on what Brett just said, when in the old big soccer days, it was really, I guess, toxic. I mean, people would consider it toxic now.
People had thicker skins back then.
There were just fewer people. Now, so if you have 100,000 soccer fans on a site and 2% of them are horrible people, well, when you move to 1 million people on the site, now you've got lots more bad voices. But back then, nobody monitored any of that stuff. You just had to, somebody want to say, I want to kick you in the balls. They could just say it, and you just had to live with it.
And that was the Grant Wall article that talked about this. That sparked that question, really, is that he quoted somebody who was like, man, I've been a supporter of this team for 30 years. And is this the fan base that we have now? I don't ever remember it being like this. I'm like, you weren't looking for it because it was there the entire time. Big soccer, as people have like these rose tinted glasses, just these fond memories of what big soccer was like, but it was just as bad as what we're seeing on Twitter, except for, again, to your point, Derek, smaller population as a whole. Yeah. Twitter is just a bigger megaphone for it. And yes, there are some people out there that are overly critical or just downright mean sometimes. You guys are public figures. You have to let this shit roll off your back.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I mean, I think that if you're someone who has as big of a following as Grant Wall might have or a player might have, you're going to get a ton of really aggressive negativity. Mm-hmm. Doesn't make it okay, but I don't know how you completely get rid of it. I don't think it's anywhere close to being the rule. And I think that the average fan, by far the average fan, not just on Twitter, but beyond it, is not toxic. I think that's, I'll stand by my statement that as someone who grew up in Philadelphia sports, it's ridiculous to suggest that the U.S. soccer fan base is toxic. I don't think so.
Did you get the end of it, though, Meg, when Bobby's like, hey, you can't get 55% of Americans to agree on anything?
That was a funny comment, except he gave the example of like, Cinnamon Toast Crunch or something.
Yeah. And I was thinking pizza. Like everyone loves pizza. Beer, wine, name your alcoholic, burgers. I mean, we all
liking soccer. We can agree on that at least, right?
Exactly.
100% of soccer fans like watching soccer. There we go.
Yeah.
So what are you up to after your break here and the Costa Rican rain? If it snowed, you were in real trouble.
Raining. There was no snow. It did stop raining. It's very warm. I wish it was snowing. I'm going to be back in Philly as of this weekend and then laying low in Philly for a while, enjoying MLS, enjoying the Union. Probably, honestly, turning back to Swan Dive stuff, both on YouTube, but also I'm setting up a Substack and getting that into motion. And then hopefully by this summer, I have a few plans in motion, which includes not just the U.S. men's national team, but I would like to go to England this summer for the women's Euros, which are happening there across the month of July, and writing about that. So, yeah, gearing up toward that. That's the next few months.
Would that be with The Guardian?
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, nothing is yet set in stone, but
because you're independent.
Yeah. Well, I would like to do both. I think no matter who I write for, whether it's The Guardian or other outlets, I want to maintain the independence because there's always going to be stories that they don't take up or other things to write independently. So, yeah, a mix of things, I would say.
Do you feel Guardian's an English paper, right?
It is.
Yeah. And they don't have any problem with you being an American?
So they have, it's a UK-based paper, but they have The Guardian US and The Guardian Australia, which are their outlets. Technically, I write for The Guardian US. I think that they do try to get people who are American to write about the American sports, actually. Not solely, but I think it's interesting writing for them. It's been a great experience. And I think that The Guardian US, which is the branch I write for, I think they like having Americans writing about the American sports.
That makes sense. And, it being that you're a woman, too, and U.S. women are, like, the best, in the world are considered always
so.
at the top. Yeah, that helps. Whereas when I try to get an article in Europe once, they're like, I don't want your stupid article. You stupid American.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, I do think that if you're asking about like whether there's like condescension or skepticism maybe toward American writers, I haven't experienced it writing for The Guardian, but do I generally think that's a thing? Sure, I do. But one of the reasons, so the guy that I'm interviewing next for the Swan Dive YouTube channel, I'm interested to talk to because he owns his own little small media company that writes about American sports. And he feels like he maybe has had a similar experience writing about NFL as a British person. And people are always like, well, what do you know, kind of thing. So I think it'll be interesting to have me and him talking to each other, me writing for The Guardian or writing about soccer and him writing about NFL. I think
I might have a little skepticism about a British guy writing about the NFL. Just a little.
I do wonder if we do it.
There's a big fan base for the NFL over there. You always have at least one NFL game a season over there. I don't know. They sell out 80,000 because it's a spectacle.
Yeah, but they send the shit games there. Jaguars.
They don't know any better. Come on.
Yeah, it's all the same to them.
They're just like rah gridiron.
Hey, they're using a rugby ball down there. Hey, look at that.
All right, Meg, I appreciate you hanging past the 1:30 marker on this show. I'm glad we got through the whole thing because there was a time there for a while I'm like, we're not getting through this. Although I did want to bring up before I let you go, how hilarious at the end did you think Gregg acknowledging vodka was?
Oh.
Or vodka?
Hold on.
Vodka. Vodka.
I call him vodka. Well, okay, so in Germany, vodka is a real name, but it's pronounced vodka. It's not pronounced vodka. So that's how I pronounced it.
Is it a German name? Is that a familiar surname?
It's not a real normal surname, no, but if it were in German, that's how it would be pronounced. So I think he meant to make a joke. Yeah. I think he made it.
Or German. I could see that. You're probably right, and I laughed at you. Now I'm the one who's Americanizing the last name, whatever it is. But I did think that's
my job.
I thought that was funny, but I also thought it was funny that Gregg, he first acknowledged how funny he thought he was, and then when asked about the technique, he was like, "It's too much," and he sounded a little bit serious. I thought that was the funnier part.
His most recent one with Gregg was like he's like doing a specific ball bounce, and he's like, I don't know what he was trying to do here. Maybe he's a little butthurt from his most recent video about him.
No, Gregg's all right-handed. That's the problem. He's got no left hand dribbling going on.
I think you're right. Yeah, that was a pretty funny part.
So I was glad that was brought up. And then the only thing we didn't really talk about are Gregg's personal growth. And when I was listening to his answers, and he's like, my personal growth is like working with other coaches and scouting I thought it should be scouting the other teams and not watching old World Cup footage, because I don't think that's going to help them at all. I thought that was a weird answer. Last question, I guess.
I think he may have been talking about like World Cup qualifying games, not necessarily World Cup games. I think that's what he meant.
I don't think so. Go ahead,
I hope so.
I'd have to listen to it again, to be honest. But I think that's an interesting comment. I think it's interesting how close he is with Gareth Southgate, or it sounds like they have a really close relationship. He's almost too complimentary for my taste. I'm just kidding. But
Me too.
I think that
he needs to be a little more toxic.
He needs to get a little angrier about the English before we play that. I think that there's a lot of work to be done, and I hope am convincing myself to be hopeful that he knows what he needs to work on. I think that includes analyzing personnel issues that we do still have in certain positions, as well as analyzing specific teams. I don't think we should take Iran lightly. Obviously England is one of the best teams in the world. I think that'll be a difficult game, but I don't think we should take Iran lightly. And I don't think Ukraine, Wales, or Scotland, any of the three of them, would be particularly easy either. So hopefully he's taking that very seriously. I think he is, though.
I don't think he has any other choice. We are, we're getting there. And I think he's a film guy, so he's going to do okay in the film thing. Like Bob Bradley. Yeah, a lot of PowerPoints, exactly. So now we got your predictions for the group at least, right? So you're saying we get out of that group?
I think we come in second. I could see it. I mean, it could go in any direction. I don't think we should take that for granted. I think it's a group we can get out of and should get out of if we do what we need to do to prepare, not just from the coaching perspective, but from the players' perspective as well. I think that they need to also drill down and make sure that they're in form and healthy and taking it seriously.
100% of Americans agree that the Redcoats are taking another L from us. Okay. I
Look
like
at
that.
More things we agree on. Yeah.
Yes. I like the positivity there. Anyhow, do you have any articles or okay, so let's just let you pitch the Swan Dive one more time. Anything you had a new show coming up, so let's do that.
It should be out tomorrow or the next day. So that's the next thing I would say to look out for, is this interview with, I'm not going to tell you who it is just yet, but yeah, he's English and he runs a media company focused on American sports. So it'll be interesting, I think, to talk to him about it. And that'll come out on the YouTube channel, but also launching the Swan Dive Substack version in the next few days as well. So I'll be announcing all of that on my Twitter. Keep an eye out there. And then all my articles I'll be posting on Twitter as well, whether that's Last Word on Sports, where Philly Union stuff will come from, but increasingly Swan Dive. I want to transition a bit of my Philly Union coverage to my Substack and independent writing, and then The Guardian as well will be more U.S. national team focused for both the women and the men.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. I'm going to wish you well.
Wait.
What?
We can't bounce.
Why?
She doesn't have necessarily to stay for all the questions, but there's at least one question on Twitter.
Oh, sorry.
I
didn't know it was a new one. Question to Meg. What was your favorite city abroad in World Cup qualifying? And to all, do you think Hoppy gets a move this summer? And do you trust that his agent will make a good deal happen? All right, Meg, go for it.
So I'm going to give you two answers to that question. And I'm going to cheat on both of the answers. So my favorite city in World Cup qualifying. So Mexico City, it's not my first time going there. My cousin lives there. I go somewhat frequently because she has children and I like to go stay with them. But that's my favorite city of the cities I visited. But it wasn't my first time. Of the World Cup qualifying locations where it was my first time, the second I'm going to say is Jamaica. And I was able to stay. So my birthday is actually in November. And I stayed for a week or two after during my birthday and left Kingston. And I would say like getting out into the countryside, into the mountains of Irish Town, which are right outside Kingston, and then getting to the beach. And I'm not really a resort person. So I stayed in like an Airbnb in this like fishing village and was next door to this like Rastafarian man who like grew his own marijuana and was like painting in the trees every morning. And
all right.
Yeah, you got a number to give to Derek there.
Yeah, no, like he was great. And we like hung out for a week and I would just be there writing on the porch and he would be like smoking weed and painting, and I had a really good time in Jamaica. So I'm gonna say Jamaica is second to Mexico City.
Awesome.
On a similar note to that question, though, you obviously just came back from everywhere in Europe. Did you have a specific location that you favored more so than others while you're out there?
So also a different question to answer, because I used to live in Prague and I was in Prague most of the time I was there. So the nostalgia and like friends and people who I know, that's going to be my favorite just because I have a connection to Prague. Second to Prague, I would say Warsaw. So I had been to Poland before and I really like Poland, but it was my first time in Warsaw specifically. And I really like Polish people. I think Warsaw is really cool. It was an interesting time to be there as well. I mean, it was a few weeks after the war had started in Ukraine. There was a lot of people going into Ukraine and leaving Ukraine that were interesting to talk to. So a sobering place to be, but a really interesting place to be and an interesting city regardless. So I would say Warsaw after Prague.
I bet. Whew. I mean, that's heavy stuff right now. So for sure. But Brett, are we done?
No.
I always have to ask Brett.
We have other questions, but this is only Meg's specific one. So I don't know, Meg, if you want to stay for the rest of the questions.
I'm good.
I'm
good. No, I've got time.
Chris, to finish your question, I do not see Hoppy getting a move this summer, although I don't know anything about it. I just don't see it happening. It's possible. He was supposed to be loaned out during the winter transfer, but that fell through for whatever reason. And I do not trust his agent would make a good deal if he did. So
I hope he gets a move. I don't have any inside info on it, but obviously, when I think about players in a dire situation, Matthew Hoppy's the top of my list.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm gonna let you guys answer this question while I'm old and I need to go to the bathroom because it's been an hour and 45 minutes. So I will be right back. It's the first time it's ever happened on the show.
So Eldon asks, are you Berhalter in now that Gregg turned on Doyle and Wall like prime WWE? Go ahead and go first.
You go. Okay.
I was going to say, Eldon, we were never Berhalter outs. I think it's kind of funny. And I like I'm not saying that he turned on them per se, but he did definitely call him out, Doyle, not necessarily by name, but Gregg because it was brought up. Or, sorry, Wall because it was brought up. But no, I found that humorous and fun.
I would say that I really liked the interview that Gregg gave. I thought it was really interesting. I thought he was more forthcoming in places, but I don't know that I had a drastic shift in my perception of Gregg from that interview. And I would agree. I don't know that I was ever Berhalter out necessarily. And in terms of Berhalter out or in, I think in for now. I think that he has passed the test in front of him, and now he has a chance for what's next.
Out of curiosity, Derek and I had this conversation on Monday.
Derek, that was very fast.
Yeah, well, I'm still young in some ways.
He's got a jar just to the side of his computer. So, but yeah, we had this conversation on Monday about Berhalter out after the World Cup. Now, if let's say the U.S. does well, get out of the group stages into the knockouts, do you possibly see USSF calling Berhalter back in?
If he gets out of the group, yeah, I do. I think he's
sorry, Brett. Same realistic answer I provided.
So again, I'm not anti Berhalter, but I'm anti bringing coaches back for more than one cycle. I feel their play just gets stale, and it doesn't. I never think it works out the best the second time around.
Didn't work. Yeah, for Bruce.
Didn't work for Bruce. Didn't work for Bradley. Didn't work for Klinsmann. Didn't work for Bruce again. So, although Bruce didn't get rehired, but
yeah,
it's just I don't know. It's even when Klinsmann got rehired, he tried to change some things up. I don't know if it was to try to spruce it up or just try different things, but I'm just not a big fan of bringing the coach back for a second cycle. My opinion.
It depends on the coach. I would say to a certain extent I agree with you, but if they're doing a good job and there's continuity in the team identity and they're on a run, I think it makes sense to keep them going. But I think from the perspective of U.S. soccer, if they get out of the group, I think they're going to keep Gregg regardless of what we think.
There's no way Ernie Stewart's getting rid of Gregg if he gets out of the group. Ernie Stewart and Gregg are attached at the hip. Those guys love each other. So who was more frustrating with all call-ups, Gregg or Jurgen? I still remember calling up the Stanford version of Jordan Morris, and NASL met Miguel Ibarra. Yeah, I mean, there are some weird ones there, but I don't know. I wasn't really a big complainer of Jurgen's call-ups. I was more of a complainer about his setups and his formations, which were weird.
So it was interesting because this actually kind of came up earlier on the show, and I just didn't see how to bring up the comments about this. But there were a lot of people that talk about Americans are forgiving ? And again, I don't know when we ever said that, but he goes, I don't think Americans have ever forgiven Jurgen for not including Donovan in the World Cup. And
Meg,
nor should he be forgiven.
Meg, were you?
I was alive and watching.
Okay.
I'm not telling you. I won't reveal exactly where I was in my aged life, but I was anti that decision personally. I mean, I think they had a reasonably good World Cup, but I don't agree with the decision. Does it keep me up at night? No. Do I overall like the Klinsmann era? I do. Do I agree with that decision? No, I don't.
Yeah, that was the worst decision he made. And it was the worst thing about it is it was personal. It was a personal thing.
Yeah.
And we found that out through Jonathan Klinsmann's little tweet that he deleted, like how personal it was in the Klinsmann household. And it was like, man, this is pretty shallow. like laughing at a guy who doesn't make the team. That doesn't seem like a cool thing to do.
Especially given his son was like the U17 or U20s goalkeeper at the time too. That was a little questionable activity there.
Does it shift or did it shift how you feel or felt about Klinsmann?
It did for me, but I wasn't a huge Klinsmann fan going into that World Cup by then. Not a huge fan. He was German. I was okay with him. And then we got to the World Cup and he significantly shifted and changed the way he played and the way we played. And I thought, okay, this guy's not a dummy after all. He knows we can't, do what he thought we wanted to do.
I guess the biggest issue with the Klinsmann era was it was just super frustrating because of all the tinkering that did go through all cycle long. And then, come World Cup, I mean, the 2014 World Cup was enjoyable to watch.
Yes.
I agree.
But I mean, as far as answering the question, what's more frustrating, I guess I'm going to go with Gregg on this one simply because not only is it frustrating call-ups with keeping like players like Yule or Trapp or insert other player we've always mentioned a little bit too long past their necessity, but also just the slow tendencies of calling in certain players that should be there.
Yeah, I go Gregg. And I go Gregg maybe even out of immediacy because it's actually still on my nerves because I think he's still slow to call in people I think should be getting called in. And again, it bears repeating. When I say that, I don't mean like call them in to have them be the starter. I just mean call them in to get them into his quote unquote system. So it's still a frustration. So I'm going Gregg.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would also say that the big difference, the good thing that Gregg did in fact carry over from the Klinsmann era was going after dual Americans, dual nationals in Europe.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing he carried over from Klinsmann. Klinsmann's got us, he got us Jermaine Jones, Brooks. He was trying out, Julian Green. I mean, he brought in a lot of dual nationals, and that seemed to start a trend that Bruce didn't like, apparently, but whatever. It was a good trend.
It was definitely the beginning of that. And I think to Gregg's credit, I think it's one of the things he's done really well out of other things that he's done.
He's
team coach.
Yeah, he's got an eye on everybody, which I like. And there's a lot to keep an eye on. There's currently 331 Americans, if you include all the U19 teams in Germany and they're all over Europe. I mean, they're everywhere. And like we do the weekend report, and I'm like, okay, new kid on the Bochum's U19 team. Never heard of him. Gonna have to go research him, but he popped up today on the on my report. So, because I go through every game and try to track, every American that plays on every single team in Europe. It's a pain in the ass. I have to be frank. I liked it better when there's just like 80 of them. It was much easier to do.
Yeah,
but
it was
now
easier.
it's pain.
No, isn't it? I think it's fun keeping track of them. You're like, no.
It is fun, but sometimes using U.S. Soccer Way, it's how kind of I go through it in transfer market. It is a bit of a pain to go through all of that sometimes. There's a lot of information out there now that we didn't have, many years ago. So it's kind of nice to have the information, but it also means there's a lot more work to go into it. At what point will we get real? Will we get the real story on WK getting kicked out of camp and the causes of feud between 3G and John Brooks? I don't want to wait a decade on the Winaldo Hart saga.
So I think WK has to be Weston McKennie.
It is.
Okay. It's just I looked at WK.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the fuck is WK?
And then what do you make of, Meg, the rumors that Brooks was somehow tied in with this whole Weston McKennie issue? I'm like, that's a crazy thing.
I have heard that.
Have you?
Some credible. Yeah.
Well,
I don't know.
Do you remember when
I don't
happened?
know, but I have heard that people who might know.
You remember when it happened? Weston's dad came out and said the only reason Weston's getting punished is because he's not ratting out other people that were out that night too, or something like that, something along those lines.
I think
so. There were definitely people out with Weston.
Go ahead, Meg. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't have the details. But I do think that there were other people involved, and I have heard John Brooks, but I don't know again. So.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem weird. I mean, would it be? It does to me at least that like McKenny and Brooks are the two guys that hang out together. I don't know. I just don't seem like
You
they're
don't see
totally.
it?
Huh?
You don't see that happening?
I don't. I think they're a different generation. I don't know. I thought McKenny be hanging with like Pulisic and the younger guy.
McKinney.
Pulisic doesn't
I'm guessing
strike me as the kind of guy who's going to go out like for the night.
But what about Pulisic's sister? Because that was the rumor. That was a horrible rumor.
It is a horrible rumor.
I'm glad
I
it's
didn't
not.
hear that.
Yeah,
I did not hear that rumor from anyone credible. So the John Brooks rumor credible.
Wasn't it the Mexican tabloids that brought that out?
Twitter. I think someone on Twitter like it sprouted out of nowhere on Twitter, but I don't know. I mean,
it's probably Brett. Probably.
Yep.
Brett.
Who's to say?
I've got like 6 different sock puppet accounts. So it's probably one of me.
Do you?
It wasn't Brett. No. We did the Miazga thing.
No, yeah. All of our shenanigans are lighthearted and humorous.
Yeah, we don't try to make them nasty. It's not fun. And then as far as Winalda Harks goes, well, we don't need to go back to that. I don't want to talk about that anymore. I've gotten in enough trouble back in 2011 on that one. I don't need to go back through that one.
What did you do?
So we used to have a cartoon show on our show.
Different from the one we have right now, though, of course.
Right. And it was a dog. It was a talking cartoon soccer dog named D-Rec. And he interviewed Steve Sampson in a fake interview, although I do a really good impression of Steve Sampson. And we go into the whole crisis because the news had just broken of what happened. And I said the dog says some pretty risque things you wouldn't say today, probably. I'd be my guess.
Right.
And Eric did not approve of that, and he X'd me from his friends list and got rid of me on Facebook. And I think it's okay. We're back together now. I think we're all good, right, Brett? I think we're good now with Eric. We cool. We smooth that over.
I would like to think so.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have, but it took 10, 12, 13 years to smooth over. He was like, I will never consider you a friend again. Anyhow, old stories. Old stories.
Is this video still on YouTube for the curious, or
did
you take it down?
It's still there.
I'm gonna look for this later.
D-Rec interviews Steve Sampson. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Noted. Okay.
I'm not proud of it, but
you should have just said no and then gave a wink. We could have given her the link.
I know.
At
we
any
could have
point
given it off
afterwards,
the show.
man.
Now we're screwed again because I've mentioned it for the 4th time.
You may want to take that down. Just say.
Well, the worst thing. Okay, no, I'm not going to say the worst thing. We'll talk about it after we're done with the show, which should be soon, right, Brett? Right?
Yep,
Brett?
we're almost done.
Holy crap! We're like, all right, indentured servants here. All right, do you think we will see guys like Terrence Boyd? No. Haji Wright? Maybe he's playing well. Julian Green? No. Bobby Wood? Don't let my answers influence you guys. Bobby Wood? No, probably not. Boyd is tearing it up in Germany. Wood has been in good form so far this season. Love your work, Meg. Hey, I like that. That's positive. Are we still talking about Terrence Boyd? He plays in Bundesliga 3. I'll let Meg answer.
I'm going to say no to all of the above, personally. I think that Gregg has limited capacity to bring in new personnel in the next year before the World Cup.
Yep.
I think if people are not like 18, 19, 20 in that era right now, and they're not getting into the World Cup, they're not getting brought in after that either. So I'm going to say no to anyone who's not already in the 25 to like 35 roster spot situation at the moment.
Didn't Haji Wright just score a brace though for Antalyaspor?
Yeah,
this weekend. I thought he did. So I mean,
we do need that desperately.
Yeah.
So that's
nine's still open. Yeah,
that's like the one position that's still wide open. Because obviously I don't know for whatever reason Gregg doesn't like Sargent. So
Haji was a talking point in Conrad and Peter's show and Davies too, I guess. And they're talking about whether or not if Berhalter is going to continue calling players in to give them a look before the World Cup, or if they're just going to, build for chemistry. And Derek and I talked about it too. And I think Derek's convinced me on it. In the sense that right now, all we have lined up are 4 games in June, 2 in September. I don't think Gregg has that much time except for to test a couple of people. I don't think he's going to make any mass changes.
No.
Yep, I'd agree with that. All right, so is there more? Please say there's not more.
Do you think Gregg will actually learn from his mistakes from World Cup qualifying?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that he has learned from some mistakes already. It depends on the mistakes. I mean, I think old habits die hard. I mean, my biggest qualm at the moment, I think that there's big questions like how to break down the low block. I don't think we do that very well just yet. And I think that things like the striker position or even the goalkeeper position are up in the air. I don't know if that's a Gregg mistake as much as just a question I still have. But my biggest qualm with him is just his inability to bring in people sooner and faster into his system. So I don't know that that's gone after World Cup qualifying. Everything
and getting rid of people sooner and getting rid of people sooner and quicker too, right? So his whole thing is sooner and quicker is not a thing he does on either end of the pipeline.
Right. Exactly.
So, it's like a very long intestine, and it's the digestion in that intestine will go on for a quite long period of time. And, sorry about that metaphor. Now that I think about now I think about the end of it. All right. Meg, I want to thank you for coming on. This has been fun. And that's the whole point. Maybe next time we'll even do some shots together, because we've done that with Sam. Sam gets his.
Sam doesn't take shots.
He doesn't take shots. He sips it very.
I mean, maybe he does. I don't know.
Almost nobly, right? Like he's a noble, a Louisiana noble.
Hey, he kept up with this last show.
He did. He did keep both. I have to give him credit. And I think Pete's the only one that's drank with us on the show besides that. But we didn't warn anybody in. Although I always tell Brett, let them know they can drink on the show because we're drinking the whole show. That's what we do. And
next time I'll come prepared for shots and sipping.
Yes. And then by the end of the show, 2 hours in, because Brett won't let us end the show, you won't even know what you said.
We're just going to have to finish questions up on the recorded segment.
Questions for us. Brett's looking around like he has more questions. I'm ready. Is there more, Brett?
Yes, of course there is. Oh, sorry. Hold on. There's a talk of the 2022 World Cup mascot in the chat right now, and I had to look it up to find out what it was about. So, yeah.
Oh, terrific. It's like a Casper the Ghost wave type thing.
Yeah.
I don't remember a single mascot from any World Cup, honestly. I don't. And I watched all of them. Like, they're in the ear, out the ear.
Okay. I have yet to find it, so it's like, that's what Bandit asked. And our chat went down a relatively dark turn.
Uh-oh.
But I love you guys. Kind of made me smirk a little bit, but still kind of dark.
What do you think about the mascot, Meg? Do you even know what the mascot for the next World Cup is?
I don't know what it's supposed to be. I thought the whole unveiling of mascot, the song, I thought it was all strange. And there was some kind of intro video where it seemed like they were in some type of metaverse and they were like, this is the future. Oh. Or they were like, this is the parallel universe. I'm not sure what they were exactly after, but I found the whole thing strange. And the mascot didn't look like a ghost, and I wasn't into it.
And I totally hated Berhalter's answer on that part of the interview we just watched that we didn't cover.
Yeah.
It was like, it's the most marvelous, spectacular show I've ever seen. No, it wasn't. It was garbage. Straight up garbage. Yeah. Nobody cared about any of that. That song was totally dumb. Like, everybody's already used those notes and sang those notes before. Like, we had to hear them again, except, in a different, framework. And yeah, I thought it was horrible. I want the draw to start, please. Can we start the draw and stop the bullshit? But yeah, it took
about an hour. It took about an hour for the actual draw to happen. And then that's another thing that's going to be interesting about this World Cup is who's going to be able to write or be honest about what it's like in the lead up and then at the World Cup. And I do think it's going to be another example when independent writing will be necessary. Because I don't know that writing for any outlet, including outlets like The Guardian or other outlets, will publish the critiques that are necessary about this kind of World Cup.
Especially after we leave, right? And no one's eyes are upon them anymore. And all of those union labor deals they've made with the workers, leading, after horrible abuses, obviously. And then we're gone, out of sight, out of mind, right? So they go back to doing the same thing they did before. And, it's a critical thing as we look forward. I think, I hope we've addressed this. I don't know. I can say 100% we've addressed the issues in FIFA. It seems like we've dealt with some corruption, but I think we still have some work to do.
Brett, you have to fill us in on what's happening in the chat. Because
Sorry, Sam goes, Cajun Nobles, what I miss? And then Bandit goes, Derek took a piss.
Oh, he did.
I did. I was trying to be nice about Sam. I think he sips his bourbon in a very noble way. Louisiana noble. That's what I called him. So,
okay. So we do have 4 questions.
No, come on. You cannot be fucking serious.
Okay. So Keyboard asks, why aren't we scheduling friendlies like Mexico? Greg plus the Fed has played Mr. Nice Guy way too much towards the European clubs. So why aren't we scheduling more friendlies in this 7-month gap?
I think we'll have the same number of friendlies. It's just that they announced them all at once, if I am remembering correctly. So they announced, how many did they announce? 5? They are playing Ecuador, Nigeria. Who else are they playing? Uruguay. They're playing Uruguay.
That's right. Yep.
Uruguay in Arizona. They're playing Nigeria somewhere around then in Texas. They're playing Ecuador, I think, end of May. Are they playing them in Atlanta?
They're playing one of the games in Atlanta, yeah. I mean, it's an entire USA tour.
Yeah. So I think they might have announced 5 friendlies, 3 in May, June, plus 2 Nations League, and then they have like 1 friendly in August and 1 in September. I could be wrong about that. I think they announced 5 friendlies plus the 2 Nations Leagues. That's 7. We're having 4 friendlies plus 2 Nations Leagues. That's 6. So I mean,
what team does Uruguay replicate for us? Haven't figured that one out yet. England? I'm not sure, because usually you're trying to play somebody who's going to generally play the same way one of your opponents is going to play, but I haven't quite figured out, looking at the list, like, okay, what team does that supposedly going to?
It's a nice, challenging opponent. I'm happy with that. I'm fine.
Okay.
I do have a Uruguayan friend who I met in Russia who has a radio channel who's coming on the Swan Dive in the next 2 weeks. So we can
announcement.
Revert to him and he'll tell us.
Maybe. I mean, there's some comparisons, but I believe Uruguay pretty much play a straight up 4-4-2, which is nothing like what England generally plays. So England will generally play like us, but they have the option of doing 5 in the back, whereas we haven't really figured that. We haven't figured that out. So we're still screwing that up whenever we experiment with it.
I'm not sure what they'll map onto, but they are a good team to play. That'll be a tough test.
They are good.
Yeah.
Cavani, Suarez up top. It's going to be hard to deal with.
Aging, but good. Yeah. They've got some good younger players too.
Big Harry Jake, and I don't think that's FIFA America, said that Uruguay is practice for Wales pacey wingers.
I think Jake would like more hair on the top, but it allows him to do good Berhalter impressions in his shows now. So, what was the question? I don't even remember what it was.
He said Uruguay will be Wales.
Yeah, it's practice for Wales pacey wingers.
Yeah, the 33% chance that they'll actually qualify. We'll see what happens. I'm sure the math is actually different from that because there are 3 teams, but 2 of them are gonna. It's like a 50% chance.
That would be a good game to go to, by the way. I think if it's Scotland over Ukraine, Scotland playing Wales in Cardiff in June, I think.
Yeah, no, that will be good because, England versus Wales, England versus Scotland. England versus Northern Ireland, England versus Ireland. All that shit is, got history behind it that it goes way beyond soccer.
Yeah, I think Wales is like the least tense for it. I think it would still be like that, but I think Wales has the least animosity behind it.
Yeah.
So to drain English energy, I'm hoping for Scotland because I feel like they take a lot out of that. But yeah, in any direction, I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean, Wales has been part of the kingdom a lot longer than all the others. So, like Scotland versus England, that's always a nasty one. Because,
half of them still want independence, and yeah,
freedom. That's William Wallace said. All right, Brett.
Big Hairy Jake does say he made this screen name so people wouldn't confuse him with FIFA America because he likes to drink and post a lot. Didn't want to bring the heat.
I don't know why he needs to be so damn hairy. You could fix that. It's called a shaver. You just do some trimming.
Why does Roldan have an exasperated case of not doing shit for the country but producing for club? He should push himself and play at a higher level.
Because he's just not. I'm sorry. I'm speaking out. Let's let Meg answer that quick first.
No, go ahead. You don't think he's national team level? I mean, I think it's a few things. I think that's one of it. I think it could also be the system, or I don't think it's a matter of him pushing himself, though. I do think he's been playing really well for Sounders, though. He had a great game last night.
He's done really well for the Sounders. Just, and again, not necessarily trying to bash the guy, but he hasn't performed for the Nats from what you would expect for a national team player. I think Berhalter mentioned Roldan was one of, and this could have just been hearsay, but he mentioned him as one of the locker room type guys. Like keeps things, keep things lively. I guess I don't know.
He's steady. I'll give him that. He's steady and generally very consistent for Seattle. Some of the things that he is not is creative, fast, or quick. But he does generally know how to work Schmelzer's system in Seattle. Like, he's really comfortable in that system. I don't think he's ever been that comfortable in Gregg's. I don't think they play the same way. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. Keep going on. Was there any sincere interest in Michael Bradley from the top 5 leagues post-Cuba? The dude was still good enough at the time, and in my opinion, should have had some fire in his ass for not qualifying. Same with Josie, to be honest.
Not that I know of. I mean, it's an interesting point. Josie Altidore has shown some signs of life in the past year in MLS. Not at the moment, not in the past few games.
Right.
But he's not that old. He's like, what is he, 30, 32?
29. I think he's like 29, 30 area.
Yeah, he's not that old, and he is in a position that we need to fill. So if he's not doing well at the moment, he's not, but he was in a somewhat good form in the past year. So it would be kind of funny if Josie Altidore showed up in the national team again. I don't think he will, but Michael Bradley, I don't know if he had interest in the top 5 leagues. Do you guys know? After Cuba?
Not that I heard of, and I was all over transfer market. So if it happened, I missed it. And I would have recommended any of those.
Oh, I lied. He was 32.
Yeah, he's 30. He's
32?
30s.
He's 32. Yeah.
It's older, but it's not out of the question, I don't think. 32,
not for
if he's perfect.
Yeah, not for an in the box poacher 9.
Well, you also have to remember the question is referring to after 2018, so he would have been 28 at the time, give or take, 29.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Bradley was already how many years was he already back in MLS?
There was no way he was going back to Europe.
His performance was declining
for
a while there. Now, mind you, he started at a higher point, so the decline was a little bit slower than somebody who wasn't as high as him.
I'm sorry, but didn't Toronto throw a big, huge bag full of money at Bradley that no normal mid-level European label team in like Italy or anywhere else Germany could afford him? I mean, his contract was like $30 million to move to Toronto from Roma. So no, there was no competition. Now, he might have thought about it. Maybe he should have thought about it, but it was a little late even for him in his career. He had obviously already slowed down. He had lost some quickness. He's still has a very high soccer IQ, but if your body won't let you do it, body's not going to let you.
Well,
do
I mean, he was never a pacey midfielder. I mean, he covered a lot of ground in his youth, and when as he got older and was still in Europe, he was incredibly sharp. But once he made the move back to MLS, he lost his sharpness, and then he got older, and it wore down. And there's no way after 2018 that he was going to garner any interest anywhere else in Europe, unless it's like a lower division, lower league, but not in the top 5.
All right. What are some fan favorites that people want to be in Qatar but probably don't deserve it? Mine would be Leon Flack. Meg, I'll let you start, unless you're not ready.
Well, don't deserve it. Don't deserve it is an interesting way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like there's fan favorites who I feel like do deserve it. He won't be there. I don't
guess
Joe Scally is going, but I do think he might deserve it.
Yeah.
Gaga Slonina, but maybe he deserves it too. I'm hearing that. I think he's a fan favorite to be the 3rd goalkeeper over Horvath if Horvath's not playing.
Brett's a Chicago Fire fan.
Are you one of the? I mean, I could see the reason behind it. To be honest with you, again, harping on the. I don't think the deserve it is the right way to put it.
That's tough. That's tough because you're basically saying that a fan favorite is just not national team quality. And now you can make the argument, say maybe they're not national team quality for 2022. Again, Slonina could definitely be in that frame for me because I joked around about the whole time when we were talking about the Mexico game this last window. There was a lot of talk about we could start Slonina at goalkeeper in Azteca, and I joked around about it. I was like, yeah, absolutely, he's my number 1. But no, I don't think even with a solid season. I mean, this is technically outside of like a handful of games last year. This is his first season as a professional, playing as a pro.
Yeah.
I don't see him getting the 3rd spot off of a Horvath or Steffen, whoever it is.
Can I give you a player that probably won't deserve it, but I would still have on my team every single time? Matthew Hoppe. Sorry.
Are you saying he doesn't deserve it though?
Yes, he doesn't deserve it because he doesn't play. I mean, in every technical aspect, as far as like metrics, tell you no. But
Jared says, "Love Derek and Brett, but Matthew Hoppe."
Yeah, I think Hoppe is the answer to that, or other strikers. Honestly, like I think Gregg is definitely bringing Jesus Ferreira and Ricardo Pepi. If one of them, like if Ricardo Pepi stays out of form, he's in a really long dry spell. I still have faith in Pepi. Does he deserve it, quote unquote? If he's still out of form come November, that's a really long dry spell.
Sargent
could be a full year.
Let's imagine other people are in form, but Pepi gets called in.
It's like, I mean, Sargent's injured right now, but prior to that, he was playing, but he still didn't get called up. So it's like, how disappointing is it going to be if Sargent doesn't make this team? He's going to be devastated.
It could very well be what happens. So I could see a variety of people in the striker position being the answer to this. Hoppe.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine Pepi not getting called in, but I also think it's interesting to wonder, like, if Pepi's still not in form come November, that's almost a year dry spell, unless he gets
it's about exactly a year,
which is a pretty long dry spell to bring in a striker before the World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I think Sargent, even though he doesn't get to play the 9 for Norwich, I think when he's on the field, he's a team player. He works his ass off, and I guess that's not, as Gregg said, I don't know how to think of him anymore. Is he a 9? Because I don't see him as a winger.
It's funny under Gregg. Go ahead, you go first.
So what's interesting, I don't know if this has anything to do with anything, but I think he has the same agent as Joe Scally. So we should just start a whole conspiracy about Sargent and Scally.
You guys heard it here. Conspiracy started. Everybody spread it on Twitter. Go for it now.
Same agent as Hoppe too?
I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, that is interesting that both of their agents are the same. So it's kind of questionable.
I think Sargent was out of form for a while. I think he was then in form and doing pretty well before he got injured. So it depends how he comes back in. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, do you guys hear the dogs barking?
Are those your dogs? You brought dogs to Costa Rica?
No, so I'm in this like it's a cool little community that's like nearby the beach, but it's like a very Costa Rican little community, and there's a lot of like stray dogs running around. So.
Yep. I can hear them. I was wondering the first time I heard it, like an hour ago or 30 minutes ago, it's like, did Gizmo get up and start? Because I've got a dog, he barks like that. I thought it was him for a second. No, he's just back there snoozing. So it's not him. Oh, now we're schmucks, Jared. Thanks.
So he says Sargent is or Hoppy's better than Sargent. The big difference there is that Sargent's playing when he's healthy. He's playing week in, week out.
Yeah.
I think what I was going to say about Sargent, what's interesting is we talk about Ferrer, and Ferrer I think plays the type of 9 that will get the most out of Berhalter ball. Because I've always said that Berhalter is not getting the most out of his 9s at all. And the way Ferrer played, always has with FC Dallas, he was more of a number 10, played behind Pepe, and our 9s for whatever reason seem to check back into our defensive third to try to collect the ball. I think quite frankly, the way Sargent's been playing more midfield and outside and winger and everything like that, I think he's basically a taller version of Ferrer. Not necessarily as productive right now by any means, but
functionally,
plays that same type of would play that same type of a role. So I'm not saying he should or should not be there. I think he definitely deserves another look this summer. On top of that, where is it at? First off, Sam said somebody clip it about your new conspiracy theory. Good job. That's going to be on the internet tomorrow. I think Keyboard Warriors is going to post it. Where was it? Here we go. P-Fox should be given another chance.
Arguably, yeah. I mean, it's hard to argue with the number of goals he's been scoring. He to me is like in the striker conversation but whether he gels with the system or if the Swiss league is as difficult as other leagues is, I guess, the question, and how he's done when he's in camp. The other one is DK, who can't seem to stay
healthy at all.
Healthy, but he's somebody who I think could come in and start performing really, really well. And
he could.
I think he's somewhat of a fan favorite. I like Daryl DK quite a lot. I'm excited for what he can do longer term. Another one fan favorite who might deserve it is Georgi Mihailovic. I like him quite a lot. Maybe he doesn't quite deserve to be in the 23-man roster. I think he should be brought in to a camp in June, hopefully. But I think a lot of people are pretty hot on Georgie, and maybe he's not quite there yet.
He would typically be
going 26.
He would typically slide into like maybe the winger or the midfield spots for Gregg Mihailovic. So I think we probably will see him in Nations League. We might. I mean, depending on how big the rosters are. I think that's what you just said, Brett.
Yeah.
So,
I think he deserves a look. He's had 2 solid or 1.5 solid, not even half, but 1 and a fifth solid season so far for Managerial. So I think he deserves a look.
I'd like to see it. Yeah.
Yep. All right, Brett.
Wait a second. No, that's all.
Meg, thank you for hanging in here for 2 hours and 22 minutes.
My pleasure. 2:22. That's a good sign for something for Tim Weah. Is that his position?
I guess. Yes, it is. I think it is. But yeah, we must be insane tonight. Thank you, Brett, for guiding the discussion with the all the comments and stuff, making it make sense. But we got to do this again, man. Got to do it again once, like, the dust starts flying up again. We got some great topics. And until then, we've got, like, months of no soccer. It's going to be really hard for us. I notice everybody's, like taking a hit on their views. Like, it's been rough going. Really? So, but, yeah, thanks for coming. Will you come again? Let's do it again.
Absolutely. I would love to. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. And I'm going to make you come on my debate series and have you debate Grant Wall.
Oh, please let me do that.
It's like Grant Wall's going to be on every week and you're just going to have somebody else new debate him.
I just have to get Grant to agree to it. But you're locked into my debate series, debating somebody.
I think Grant would be more comfortable against Brett or I, honestly, because he already knows who we are. So
nice.
But if you match him up with Tack, that might be a bomb. Just waiting to explode,
You could be debating switch. You could say, yeah, you're going to be on there with Derek, and then all of a sudden Tack shows up.
This is Derek, kind of.
Sort of. The younger version, like 30 years younger. So we will have you back, and it's great, like getting to know you better, getting to know about, all your travails and your work covering soccer. And I only wish you the best. And I'm going to say thank you for coming on the Straight Red Card, and make sure all of you like and subscribe, and then go to Meg's place at the Swan Dive and make sure you like and subscribe to that. And we will be back with you the next time on the Straight Red Card.
Bye, everyone.
Do it again. Oop. Ah, fuck. And like it. That's way too many likes. I got a comment on a channel. Fuck. Oh. Yeah. That should probably do. It should probably do. That should probably do.
That hurt. More verticality.